I am unleashing a mysterious revival in Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 126, A Magic. With Gwen's cooperation and the Osborn Group's powerful biological laboratory team, it only took a little effort for Ailin and his team to dispel Madame Helen's suspicions. After learning that the scar-removing potion Ailin had purchased would be arriving soon, and that she could use it to remove the scars on her calves after her injuries healed, Helen's complexion improved noticeably. After all, no woman would not appreciate beauty. Just then, an elderly female nurse entered the ward, pushing a cart filled with gauze and medicine. She glanced at Gwen in the ward and said with a smile, "Miss Gwen, will you change Madame Helen's dressings yourself today?" "Of course," Gwen said, taking the cart from the nurse and thanking her. "Thank you, Miss Syndra, you're welcome." After a smile, the nurse turned to Helen and said, "Madame Helen, you have a good daughter. At least my daughter has never changed my dressings, not even a band-aid." Helen, lying on the bed, narrowed her eyes and smiled. "Gwen is the best angel God has given me." After a brief greeting, the nurse said, "I'll be back in half an hour to get the cart." She hurriedly left the ward, pushing another cart to the door and heading to the next ward. Gwen had secured the dressing job from the nurse. Having become a lab assistant at Osborn Group while still in high school, Gwen's understanding of medicine and the human body far surpassed that of ordinary nurses. At least when it came to changing dressings, Gwen could do it better and more diligently than the others. The hospital's head nurse, after witnessing Gwen changing Helen's dressing, agreed to her request. Helen's injuries were all on her calf, so Gwen didn't dismiss Ailin out of caution. Instead, she asked Ailin to bring a basin of water. After removing the gauze from Helen's leg, Gwen carefully cleaned the area around her wound. Just as she was finished, about to apply the new dressing the nurse had just brought, Ailin suddenly asked, "Ms. Helen, do you believe me?" Helen, watching her daughter change her wound, was slightly surprised, then smiled and nodded. "Of course." Ailin smiled and said, "In that case, let me perform a magic trick for you." As Gwen stared at her in amazement, Ailin walked over to Helen's bedside and placed a light hand on the wound. "Look, the magic begins." Ailin smiled faintly at Gwen and Helen, then mentally channeled the angel scepter and performed a primary holy light healing. The next second, a soft, milky white light emanated from Ailin's vacant hand and, as Helen stared in shock, slowly descended onto her legs. Then, Helen felt a distinct warmth rising from her swollen calves and rapidly spreading throughout her body. The warmth seemed to open every pore in Helen's body, causing her to close her eyes in pleasure. By the time Helen regained consciousness, the milky white light had vanished, like a fleeting magic trick. However, even though it had vanished, Helen could clearly feel her body relaxing. Her own wounds were particularly striking. Her calves, which had been noticeably swollen just a second ago, had visibly shrunk, and the scarlet scars had faded. It was as if, in that brief moment, she had regained the strength of 2 weeks' recuperation. This miraculous sight widened Helen and Gwen's eyes, as they stared at Ailin in amazement. This is a magic show that will help Ms. Helen recover faster. Do you like it?" Ailin stepped back slightly and gracefully bowed to Helen and Gwen, like a magician finishing a performance, elegant and mysterious. Perhaps having witnessed Ailin's miraculous side, Gwen's sensitivity to this scene was much greater than Helen's. She gazed with delight at Helen's visibly healed wounds. "Of course I like it," she said excitedly. "Is this one of your magical abilities? Ailin, could you use it a few more times? If so, maybe my mother's injuries can be healed." Gwen, before Gwen could finish, Helen, having recovered from her shock, interrupted her daughter sharply. "Thank you, Ailin. I love your magic trick. I don't know how you did it, but I know it's not easy." "Don't worry, Gwen and I will keep this a secret." Compared to the overly excited Gwen, Helen, with her rich life experience, had clearly considered more and was more aware of how incredible this scene truly was. Gwen, standing nearby, quickly caught on after hearing her mother's words. She looked at Ailin with a hint of apology. Just as she opened her mouth to say something, Ailin smiled and said, "You can't perform this magic trick every day. Madame Helen's body can't handle such intense performances." Gwen's eyes dimmed slightly, and Ailin changed the subject, saying, "However, I can find time to perform for Madame Helen once a week. That way, Madame Helen's body can handle it." And while her recovery speed will be a bit exaggerated, it won't be as horrifying, really. Of course, after Ailin's assurance, Gwen's jewel-like eyes suddenly shone with a dazzling brilliance, causing Ailin to lose his focus for a moment. However, he quickly recovered. Facing Ailin, Gwen keenly caught Ailin's momentary expression. Her cheeks flushed slightly, but the corners of her mouth curved into a more beautiful curve. Helen, lying on the hospital bed, smiled beautifully after witnessing their interaction. A little over half an hour later, Ailin drove away from the hospital with Gwen, who had replaced Helen's medication and gauze. In the Aston Martin, Gwen tilted her head, gazing at Ailin with her jewel-like eyes. "That magic trick, like the divination, is also one of your special abilities?" she asked. Chapter 127. I still owe you a big meal. No, Ailin shook his head. To be precise, this is a magical item with a special ability called Holy Light Healing. By the way, while Holy Light Healing can quickly heal injuries, it also depletes some of the body's natural nutrients. During this time, you should prepare more nutritious food for Madam Helen. Is that so? I see. After hearing Ailin's explanation, Gwen quickly understood why Ailin had said at the hospital that Helen's body couldn't handle the daily treatment. It was simple. Helen's body wasn't getting enough nutrients. Forced treatment, while it would speed up the healing of Helen's calf injury, would actually strain her body, making it more trouble than it's worth. After clarifying her confusion, Gwen thanked Ailin again. "Thank you, Ailin." Gwen's face was tilted to the side, the sunlight from the window shining on her profile, making her look very pretty. Ailin glanced at Gwen, then checked the time. "I know a great restaurant nearby. Why don't we go try it? I actually owe you a feast." Gwen blinked at Ailin. "Can your cooking be as good as Helen's?" "That depends on the chef." With a throttle, Ailin turned right onto Fifth Avenue amidst the roar of the engine. Within minutes, Ailin parked his Aston Martin near a restaurant. Winston's Dream Restaurant. Gwen saw the restaurant and gaped in wonder. Of course, Gwen knew about it. While not a 3-star Michelin restaurant, it was more famous than any other in New York. It was said that the chef had won a federal award. Helen and George had also wanted to experience this so-called dream restaurant, but it was a membership-based restaurant. Different membership levels offered different privileges, and junior members had to queue up months in advance to reserve a table. Although George had secured a junior membership, the nature of his work meant he couldn't predict his free time for several months, so his family had never been able to visit the restaurant. "Are you a member here too?" Gwen, exiting the car, looked at Ailin with a look that was partly surprised, partly delighted, and partly curious. But Winston's Dream Restaurant is notoriously difficult to reserve. Even members have to wait months in advance to secure a table. "How did you manage to get one?" "Really?" Ailin smiled, then closed the side panel and looked at Gwen. "That means I didn't take you to the wrong place today, right?" "Gwen, please come in." Gwen, Winston's Dream Restaurant, with its 5 floors and 5 dreamlike dining environments, each decorated with different dreamy themes, had 6 tables arranged in a different style, for a total of 30 tables. Each table only served 2 or 3 groups of customers per day. Winston's Dream Restaurant is actually quite large, but to ensure a pleasant dining environment for every guest, each table is separated by an invisible barrier, maintaining ample distance. Upon entering, Ailin presented a black and gold card and was enthusiastically ushered to a prime table on the 5th floor. From the 5th floor, a spiral staircase descended toward the center of the restaurant, offering a panoramic view of the restaurant's diverse dreamscapes, floor after floor. Beautiful. Gwen's eyes lit up as she gazed at the dreamy decor, pulling her phone from her bag. "What are you doing?" "What do you mean?" "Taking pictures, of course." "Ah." Ailin watched one snapping photos, then glanced at the women who trickled in from the entrance. They were all taking photos of the restaurant, some even sending videos to their friends and intimates. Ailin couldn't help but wink at Gwen. As expected. Even though it's a different world, women still share many things in common, regardless of the world. After capturing the various scenes of the restaurant on her phone, Gwen flipped through the photos she had just taken and looked at Ailin. "If I send these to Ilya, she'll be mad with jealousy. She's always wanted to try this restaurant with her boyfriend, but she can't get a table. And of course, my parents are the same way." Ilya was one of Gwen's few female friends at school, and a close friend. Ailin had seen her before, but didn't remember her well. She seemed to have taken a long leave of absence recently due to illness, and Ailin hadn't even seen her since she arrived. Honestly, Gwen looked at Ailin curiously. How did you manage to do this? You clearly came here on a whim this time. Ailin took out a black and gold card she had shown upon entering the restaurant and handed it to Gwen. Is this the legendary anonymous black gold membership card for Winston's Dream Restaurant? Oh my goodness. How did you get it? I heard that only 5 of these cards were printed when Winston's Dream Restaurant first opened, and they were given to 5 mysterious figures. Ailin nodded. Remember the textile factory? I found this card outside the factory. It's our shared trophy. If George and Lady Helen want to come, you can give it to them. With it, they can enter Winston's Dream Restaurant, and the restaurant manager will quickly arrange a table for the card holder. This anonymous black gold card was indeed Ailin's trophy from the textile factory. If Ailin hadn't happened to recognize it, it would have either been destroyed in the flames of the explosion or ended up in the police station, becoming evidence. Of course, Ailin had used divination to determine that this card would cause him trouble before he took it. Found it, Gwen rolled her eyes at Ailin, clearly disbelieving his excuse and treating it as a pretext for Ailin to lend her the card. After turning the black and gold card over and over for a few seconds, Gwen remained silent for a moment before returning it to Ailin. Never mind, I'm not going to do that, Ailin asked, somewhat puzzled. Why? Gwen replied, I think it's more meaningful for my parents to have a table that they worked so hard to secure. If Gwen gave the card to George and the others, the fact that she and Ailin had dined at this restaurant would be exposed. Winston's Dream Restaurant. It actually has a unique nickname, the Dream Couples Restaurant. Besides those who come here for its reputation, the most frequent diners here are couples of all kinds. In this dreamy dining environment, couples, over wine and deep affection, often have a much higher chance of success when proposing at the table. It's said that this restaurant helps several couples get married every day in New York City, further boosting its reputation. Similarly, this is why it is increasingly difficult to find a location for Winston's Dream Restaurant. If George knew that he and Ailin had dined at this restaurant alone, he would never think of eating at his house again. Chapter 128 Gwen, give it to me. So, rather than lending the black card to George and Helen, which would potentially prevent Ailin from ever coming to her house again, Gwen preferred to let Helen and George continue to queue for their orders. George and the others had already waited so long, so they surely wouldn't mind waiting a little longer. Gwen's answer surprised Ailin a little, but he didn't dwell on it. Winston's Dream Restaurant served food quickly. Not long after Ailin and Gwen placed their orders, the waiter brought each exquisite dish to the table. Gwen took a photo of the exquisite dishes on the table with her phone, then she and Ailin carefully savored the flavors. It had to be said that Winston's Dream Restaurant, a restaurant so renowned in the metropolis of New York, had truly exceptional food. It was arguably the best Western food Ailin had ever tasted. Aside from the slightly insufficient portions, the meal exceeded Ailin's expectations in every way. For Gwen, dining alone with Ailin in this dreamy restaurant was even more special. They were in a hurry to get back to school. After dinner, Ailin drove the Aston Martin with Gwen back to school. In the parking lot at the school gate, a surprised voice echoed in his ear as Ailin stepped out of the car. A woman with delicate features, long fiery red hair, and a youthful, energetic demeanor, dressed as sexy as a Mustang, leaned against a Hummer. She blinked at Gwen as she emerged from Ailin's car and let out a small, surprised "huh." Upon seeing this voluptuous young beauty, Gwen's jewel-like eyes flashed with surprise. She said happily, "Aaliyah, are you well? Why didn't you tell me you were back at school? I was going to give you a surprise, but who would have thought?" The sexy beauty glanced at Ailin before turning to Gwen. "You gave me one first." This voluptuous woman with a wild and untamed beauty was none other than Gwen's good friend, Aaliyah. Having finally recovered from her illness, Aaliyah couldn't wait to return to school, wanting to surprise her best friend, Gwen. To that end, she had deliberately kept her return to school secret. But who would have thought, before she could even surprise Gwen, Gwen would give her a big surprise first. Upon arriving at school, Aaliyah heard rumors circulating around the school that her best friend, Gwen, had left in Ailin's Aston Martin. This was coupled with a rumor that someone had secretly witnessed Gwen kissing Ailin during high school. As soon as these two pieces of news came out, from a certain perspective, this almost confirmed that Ailin and Gwen were in a relationship. She'd just called in sick, and all her best friends had boyfriends, and she hadn't even heard of it? Impossible. As Gwen's best friend, Aaliyah had initially been skeptical. But who would have thought that, having gone to the parking lot to catch them in the act, she'd actually caught Gwen getting out of Ailin's Aston Martin. This had shaken her convictions. Could it be that Gwen had found a boyfriend and hadn't told her? Meanwhile, watching Ailin, who kept examining her and Ailin with inquiring eyes, Gwen's eyes flickered, like a kitten caught stealing dried fish. Seeing Gwen's evasive gaze, Ailin blinked, then suddenly looked at Ailin. Are you and Gwen in a relationship, huh? So direct? Ailin was stunned by this. Gwen, standing beside him, pushed Ailin awkwardly. Don't talk nonsense. Ailin and I aren't what you think. Ailin rolled her eyes. What am I thinking? I saw you get out of this guy's sports car with my own eyes. Don't tell me I saw it wrong. I'm not blind. Ailin just took me to the hospital. I told you my mom's in the hospital, huh? Ailin wasn't relieved by Gwen's explanation. Instead, her eyes widened. He took you to see Aunt Helen? You've even met her parents. Gwen, you're so mean. I'm your best friend. If I hadn't heard the rumors about you two the moment I got back to school, I wouldn't have known you two had gotten this far. No, Gwen, you have to give me an explanation, or this matter won't go away. Ailin couldn't help but chuckle at Gwen's embarrassed look under the pressure of her best friend. Ahem, after a deliberate cough, Ailin interrupted Gwen's pressure. Ailin, is that right? Gwen told me you wanted to go to Winston's dream restaurant but couldn't get a reservation, right? Ailin waved his palm, and a black and gold card engraved with a dreamy pattern suddenly appeared on his empty hand. Huh? Is this a magic trick? He seems quite skilled. No wonder he was able to hook up with my Gwen. Seeing the black and gold card suddenly appear in Ailin's palm, Ailin's eyes lit up, and her impression of him instantly changed from a wealthy gigolo to an interesting person. For high school students, an interesting skill can sometimes be more valuable than wealth, especially for women like Ailin, whose family is not short of money. But the next second, Ailin, captivated by the magic, her eyes shifted, fixed on the black and gold card. A flicker of familiarity flickered in those beautiful, large eyes. After a moment of confusion, Ailin opened her mouth slightly and said in disbelief, "This is..." Ailin smiled and said, "This is the black gold card for Winston's dream restaurant. If you want to go there next time, you can ask Gwen to borrow it. I'm busy, so I won't bother you two." With that, Ailin shoved the black gold card into Gwen's hands. Gwen looked at the black gold card in her hand, then glanced at Ailin, who winked at her. She immediately understood what Ailin meant. Just then, a voice called out from the school gate, "Aaron." Looking at the chubby boy waving at him from a distance, Ailin smiled at Gwen and Ailin. "My friend is calling me. I'll be leaving now, okay?" Ailin, who had been planning to interrogate Gwen about her relationship with Ailin, now paid no attention to Ailin. She hugged Gwen's arm tightly and said in an almost pleading tone, "Gwen, give it to me. Ahem, I need to take a day off. I have to drive 5 or 6 hours back to my hometown tomorrow. I really don't have time to write, so I'm applying for a day off." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129 Night Exploration. You're going to die. What are you grabbing at? Listening to the faint laughter coming from behind him, Ailin shook his head silently. Then he quickened his pace and walked over to Doug, who was standing at the school gate. Looking at the backpack on the fat boy's back, Ailin was slightly surprised and said, "School isn't over yet. Why are you carrying a backpack, big dog? What's the matter? Are you planning to skip class this afternoon? Aren't you afraid your mom will rush over with a feathered duster and beat you up?" Doug, the fat boy, rolled his eyes at this and said, "What's that look? Didn't you see the leave request in my hand?" As he spoke, the fat boy's mood suddenly became low, and his eyes dimmed as he said, "My uncle was found dead on 13th Street this morning. My mom called me at noon and asked me to take a few days off to help with my uncle's funeral. After all, my grandparents passed away a long time ago, and in terms of relationship, our family is my uncle's closest relatives. Sorry, big dog. My condolences." After offering his condolences, Ailin was suddenly stunned. It was 13th Street again. Could it be that the death of Big Dog's uncle was also related to that so-called dirty guy on 13th Street? Before Ailin could voice his doubts, the chubby Doug spoke up. "Alright, enough with the condolences. I've heard that word enough today. Let's change the subject. How about we talk about how far along you and Gwen are? Honestly, in all my time at school, I've never seen Gwen get in that guy's car. Also, where did you get that flashy sports car? You're not renting it, are you?" Seeing Doug unwilling to elaborate, and considering he was one of the few friends he could talk to, Ailin gave up on trying to get more details from him. He could find out all that information by heading to 13th Street. After figuring this out, Ailin said to the fat boy, "Gwen and I are just ordinary friends." "Really?" "Of course. Gwen is the campus beauty of Midtown High School. If you could woo such a beautiful girl, would you hide it?" The fat boy instinctively replied, "Of course not. If I could woo such a beautiful girl, I would definitely announce it to the whole world." Ailin shrugged. "That's it. If there really was something between Gwen and I, would I deny it?" "It seems so." The fat boy looked at Ailin, feeling that there was something wrong with his words. Ailin and the fat boy hadn't chatted for long when a yellow taxi pulled up in front of them. After saying "see you later" to Ailin, the fat boy Doug got into the taxi and disappeared from Ailin's sight. After nightfall, Ailin crossed several blocks, passing by low-rise buildings with bright lights, and arrived at the 13th Street Doug had mentioned. As the worst located and least populated street in Chinatown, 13th Street was even more dilapidated than Ailin had imagined. The abandoned factories looming over the street, the few shops still operating, and the somewhat desolate atmosphere all stood in stark contrast to the bustling other parts of Chinatown. Of course, Ailin, having never been here before, couldn't be sure if this was the result of the filthy things rumored about 13th Street, or if it was simply that desolate. He couldn't tell if it was the terrifying rumors of the fatal suffocation, or something else entirely. Under the night sky, 13th Street was sparsely populated. And everyone was in a hurry, as if pursued by some terrifying presence. Only a few brave young people gathered at the corners, idle and unoccupied. Some held cigarettes, others clutched bottles of wine. They gathered in groups of 3 or 5, or crouched alone in dark corners. Every new face was met with a stare of empty eyes. After scanning the area and finding no one else, Ailin headed for the nearest group. As Ailin approached, they, gathered together drinking and chatting, also noticed him. 2 of them, 2 yellow-haired men, bottles in hand, saw Ailin approaching the alley, seemingly attempting to cross it. They exchanged a silent glance, their eyes gleaming with a different light. Once Ailin had truly entered the alley, he observed them for a moment before reluctantly standing up and approaching him. Seeing the 2 yellow-haired men approaching with seemingly malicious intent, Ailin smiled and said, "I have a question for you. I've heard some strange things have been going on 13th Street lately. Do you know anything more?" Like the man who died today, the 2 men were surprised to see Ailin hadn't been scared away by them and even dared to ask for information. Their eyes lit up, and a strange smile appeared on their faces. They walked closer and closer to Ailin. When they were close enough, they suddenly reached for their waists and grinned at Ailin. "Want to ask questions?" "Sure, as long as you, a pretty boy, can satisfy us 2 brothers next time, I'll tell you anything you want to ask." Just as the 2 yellow-haired men were about to pull out the folding knives from their waistbands, Ailin quickly drew a silenced pistol from his waistband and fired a shot into the wrist of the man in front of him. Puff! The sudden gunshot startled the yellow-haired man at the back. Instantly, his mind, slightly numbed by alcohol, sobered up instantly. He watched his companion drop his folding knife with a swaying sound, clutching his wrist and screaming like a pig being slaughtered. Before the yellow-haired man could fully react, he saw Ailin holding the gun steadily in his hand. He didn't even look at the man lying on the ground holding his wrist, but instead steadily moved the muzzle horizontally, pointing it at his face. When the black muzzle of the gun was pointed at his head, the yellow-haired punk's face turned pale with fear, and even his pants gradually became wet. "Now, can you answer my question properly?" "Of course." "Then tell me what that filthy thing on 13th Street is." The uninjured man's legs trembled, and he replied to Ailin with a sad face, "Brother, we really don't know. Why don't you think about it carefully?" When the man being pointed at was about to burst into tears, he seemed to suddenly remember something and pointed to a building in the distance and said, "I remember, I drove for 6 or 7 hours today and just got back home. I'll write a chapter first. I'll try to catch up on the ones I owe this weekend." Chapter 130 Suffocating Shadow. I remember now. That apartment building, that very apartment building. Legend has it that the recent deaths on 13th Street are all connected to that apartment building. In the very beginning, the deaths started in that Penguin apartment. The community's last ritual was also performed there. He looked in the direction the man pointed. In the dim light, between the sparse branches of the trees, he could vaguely see a dark gray building in the distance. Penguin apartment? Could this be the source of the strange events on 13th Street? After learning this information, Ailin turned to the man and asked gently, "Anything else?" "Nothing else, woo woo woo. We're just some small-time thugs that even the gangs don't care about. As for the rest, I really don't know," Ailin nodded. "If that's the case, then I won't disturb you." With that, Ailin snapped his fingers, instantly mobilizing the power of his mind, instantly arousing all the lust in the yellow-haired man. Then he sheathed his gun and headed for another gathering of thugs. After Ailin left, the yellow-haired man, still standing, his eyes bloodshot and breathing heavily, walked towards his companion, still wailing on the ground. "Don't come over here." Not long after, a shrill wail echoed from the alley. Meanwhile, Ailin was in another alley, using the same method on another group of thugs, extracting the information he desired from them. When the third round of screams rang out, the remaining thugs in the alleys of 13th Street seemed to have received a signal. They hurriedly fled the alleys where they usually spent their time and made a little money, disappearing in a matter of minutes. The yellow-haired man hadn't lied to Ailin. The other thugs shared similar accounts of the strange events on 13th Street. While they didn't know the truth behind the incident, they all believed it all stemmed from the Pingan apartment. After walking a few hundred meters under dim light on the uneven sidewalk, Ailin finally saw the Pingan apartment the thugs had been talking about. The streetlights surrounding the building had, for some unknown reason, gone out. The night surrounding the 5-story building was like a thick, black satin, and a flock of crows circled and danced on the rooftop. The building had a single entrance, a large, rusty iron gate with a brand new lock. The gate is so shabby, but the lock is quite new. Wait, what is this? A piece of white paper was taped to the door. Ailin initially thought it was an advertisement, but upon approaching, he discovered it was a "Do Not Enter" sign. After glancing at the "Do Not Enter" sign, Ailin's eyes, already darkened and entering a clairvoyant state, fixed their gaze on the building before him. In his clairvoyant state, the dilapidated building was filled with a gray, dead air and a suffocating atmosphere of despair. These strands of despair, gathering together to form a nearly cohesive rope, were the product of countless despairing individuals within this apartment, gathered bit by bit over the years. These despairing auras were so vast that they seemed to have coalesced into a solid mass. After spending too long in such an environment, even the most optimistic person would slowly become bound by despair, gradually losing hope in life. Surely, Pingan apartment is unsafe, Ailin exhaled deeply, looking towards the building. Although entering such an apartment so late at night seemed ominous, Ailin had no intention of changing his mind. As he approached the building, Ailin received a message from the Scales of Fate. Ding. Detection. The second-level forbidden item suffocating shadow is incubating within this building. The host is strongly advised to contain it before it successfully develops. Predictions suggest that collecting it will yield a significant amount of fate points. After receiving the notification from the Scales of Fate, Ailin knew his earlier suspicions were correct. The strange events on 13th Street were indeed closely linked to the forbidden item. However, contrary to Ailin's expectations, this seemed to be a forbidden item in the making. Of course, even before it was fully formed, this forbidden item had already caused such unrest and resulted in so many deaths, which clearly demonstrated its extraordinary nature. Second-level forbidden item, that seems to be a new term. It seems that if this forbidden item suffocating shadow is truly conceived, it will be significantly more powerful than the forbidden item Moonlight DJ at the Morning Star Bar. The forbidden item Moonlight DJ at the Morning Star Bar killed hundreds of people in just a few days. Who knows how many more lives this second-level forbidden item suffocating shadow will cause once it is successfully conceived. With this thought, Ailin took a deep breath, and with a flick of his wrist, a thin wire appeared at his fingertips. He inserted the wire into the keyhole of the large lock, and after a few deft turns, the brand new lock opened with a click. After removing the hanging lock, Ailin pulled hard, and the apartment door flew open. Whoosh! The moment the heavy iron door swung open, a turbid air, faintly tinged with a putrid stench, assaulted his face. Like long-abandoned buildings, this apartment building was filled with a stench of decay and desolation. But according to the thugs, this building, called Pingan Apartment, had still had quite a few residents just 2 weeks ago. If it weren't for the bizarre incident that spread throughout Chinatown, shocking the neighborhood's Chinese council members and ordering a complete evacuation of the building, perhaps there would still be quite a few people living in Pingan Apartment right now. How could such an apartment building become so dilapidated in just a few days? Before Ailin could ponder this question, suddenly, with a thump, A figure emitting a strong stench of decay instantly dropped from above Ailin's head. Looking up, Ailin saw a pale, eerie face lunging towards him. The strangely long tongue drooped almost to its chest, secreting an unknown black mucus. Its cold, stiff face seemed neither to smile nor to weep, and its bulging eyes were filled with despair for the world. From the moment they locked eyes, a despair so intense it was breathtaking spread through Ailin's heart, flowing from their gaze. Edited. Chapter 131 Forgotten Breath. Faced with this sudden change, Ailin tilted his body with a hint of disdain, letting the pale face pass by him. Then, with a thud, he smashed the yellowed tiles on the floor with his head and bones, creating cracks. The suffocating despair hadn't caused much of a stir in Ailin's heart. Although Ailin's current spiritual attainments hadn't yet reached a state of true concentration, he could easily deal with the despair that threatened to taint him. The suffocating despair barely gained momentum before Ailin's mental will suppressed it. Huh? Why is there a dead body here? This apartment building was vacated by the Chinese council members in Chinatown. Before they did, they would have surely sent someone to inspect it. If there had been such a visible body at the entrance to Ping an apartment, no matter how careless the inspectors were, they wouldn't have missed it. So, this meant that the corpse most likely appeared after Ping an apartment was emptied. This was quite interesting. Without knowing the true power of the forbidden item, the suffocating shadow, Ailin cautiously avoided touching the corpse that had fallen from above him. Instead, he crouched down at a distance and observed it with his flashlight. It was a dead woman, and based on his earlier assumptions, she hadn't been dead long. However, the strong stench of decay emanating from her body suggested she had been dead for a considerable time, somewhat contradicting Ailin's assumptions. However, considering the extraordinary power imbued in the corpse, Ailin wasn't surprised. Her long, protruding tongue made her look like someone who had died of asphyxiation by hanging, but strangely, there was no visible wound on her neck. It looks like the female corpse died of suffocation. Could this be the power of the forbidden item, Shadow of Suffocation, which hasn't yet been fully developed? Ailin stood up and looked at the hallway before him, which led into thicker darkness. The apartment was much larger than Ailin had imagined. Although the speed of its decay was somewhat strange, there was nothing but dust and debris on the floor. The long hallway made the interior of the apartment seem even more winding and profound, and the dark green doors on both sides of the hallway gave it an invisible sense of cramped depression. The walls on both sides of the hallway were so old that the paint was peeling off, adding a sense of desolation to the apartment. After a moment's thought, Ailin walked towards the apartment. As he walked, Ailin felt a sense of fear. Behind the peeling paint, he could faintly see dark red spots, which seemed to be the remains of blood. Meanwhile, every time Ailin walked past the dark red spotted walls, he could smell a foul odor, as if there were corpses buried behind them. After a few steps, Ailin suddenly saw another body near a trash can in the corner. The second one, the third one, as Ailin continued to explore, even climbing the stairs and entering the second floor of the apartment building, more and more bodies appeared before Ailin. Some huddled beside the trash can, some lay quietly at the corner of the stairs, some knelt on the ground, facing the wall with expressions of extreme pain. The sight of so many bodies made Ailin's heart tremble, and his expression gradually became solemn. These bodies were men and women, young and old, some dressed neatly, others in rags. They seemed unrelated, but at this moment, they all shared a striking similarity: they all seemed to have died of suffocation. The bodies were unharmed, their necks bear the marks of strangulation that would have caused suffocation, yet so many had, shockingly, died of asphyxiation. This sent a chill through Ailin's heart as he delved deeper and deeper. At the same time, a strange feeling welled up within him. It was as if he'd forgotten something crucial, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't place it. That strange feeling lingered, and Ailin instinctively sensed something was amiss. For a moment, he couldn't pinpoint it, and could only speculate as he walked. All the bodies seemed to have died of asphyxiation, yet there's not a single wound on their bodies. What could be going on? As he pondered this, Ailin's legs, which had been constantly moving forward, suddenly stopped. With the sound of a weakened heartbeat, Ailin muttered in surprise, "It seems like I haven't breathed in ages." In the deserted, almost pin-drop quiet apartment, Ailin's voice echoed like thunder in his mind. At this moment, Ailin finally realized that he had forgotten to breathe since he hadn't known when. Instantly, the strange feeling he'd been feeling was resolved. Breathing is a near instinct for everyone, a spontaneous, automatic action of the body. Even when the mind is asleep, The mouth will instinctively and subconsciously suck in the surrounding air. But this time, he had forgotten to breathe. He had subconsciously ignored that seemingly innate human ability. How incredible. It wasn't until he began to feel a slight sense of suffocation, coupled with the painful expressions of the dead bodies, that he realized what was happening. Upon realizing this, Ailin subconsciously increased his breathing. However, as he tried to take a deep breath of fresh air, he found that the air around him seemed frozen, preventing him from extracting any oxygen to relieve the oppression. Breathing, Ailin, constantly reminding himself to breathe, realized that since entering the building, he had been unconsciously affected by the shadow of suffocation. This even caused Ailin to abandon his almost instinctive breathing ability. It seems I've been affected by the suffocating shadow. It seems it can't wait to affect me so soon, it seems. Chapter 132 The danger is more than suffocation. It's already so eager to influence me. It seems this level 2 forbidden item, which hasn't even been successfully conceived yet, is even more eager than I thought. At this thought, Ailin breathed a sigh of relief. The suffocating shadow's eagerness to attack him meant that it, still in the process of gestation, had instinctively sensed danger and was seeking to eliminate the threat by tackling him. For Ailin, this was actually good news. At the very least, it hinted that this level 2 forbidden item, still in the process of gestation, wasn't as powerful as he'd imagined. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so eager to attack him. But before Ailin could relax his tense nerves, the clown's keen intuition instantly made his hair stand on end. The intense intuition made Ailin feel a sense of danger coming from all directions. The intensity of the danger surged from all directions, making it impossible for Ailin to determine its specific source. Meanwhile, Ailin's heartbeat slowed and grew heavier. After a prolonged period without breathing an adequate oxygen intake, Ailin's blood oxygen levels plummeted, even his heartbeat weakening. Simultaneously, dizziness, weakness, and other symptoms began to appear, gradually worsening. This was the second level forbidden item, the suffocating shadow, taking its toll on him. If he couldn't find and contain it in time, or escape the suffocating shadow's range, prolonged oxygen deprivation alone could kill Ailin. While a Sequence 8 clown possessed extraordinary abilities far beyond those of ordinary humans, he wasn't truly transcendent. At the very least, prolonged suffocation could still kill him. Sensing the changes in his body, Ailin's eyes narrowed. Guess we need to hurry and deal with this thing. Just then, a pale hand silently reached out from behind Ailin, out of his sight, and grabbed Ailin's kidney. Just as the pale hand was about to reach Ailin, the seemingly unaware Ailin suddenly dodged to the side, dodging the pale hand's kidney attack. Almost immediately, Ailin's right hand flipped, and a pistol slipped into his palm. Barely aiming, Ailin raised the muzzle and pulled the trigger. A second later, a faint flash of fire emanated from the silenced muzzle, shattering a piece of the skull of a corpse lying in the corner. Brain matter, emitting a strong stench of decay, splattered everywhere. Had Ailin not quickly sought cover, he might have faced another biological attack from the corpse, having just dealt with a corpse's kidney attack. What's going on? Why is this corpse moving? I just used my clairvoyance to observe all the corpses along the way. They're clearly just ordinary corpses, not supposed to possess extraordinary powers. Ailin's face was filled with disbelief. He continuously channeled spiritual energy into his eyes. As more and more spiritual energy poured in, Ailin's eyes grew deeper. Soon, he noticed something amiss in the corpse that had attacked him with a kidney attack. Although Ailin had shattered a section of the corpse's skull, its dark shadow remained intact. It even wriggled, attempting to control the corpse and bring it back to life. Is this a shadow? The Pingan apartment was completely dark at night. If Ailin hadn't channeled sufficient spiritual energy into his eyes, amplifying his clairvoyance to its fullest, even the Joker's keen intuition wouldn't have been able to detect the abnormality in the inconspicuous shadow. Shadow of suffocation. It seems I underestimated this level 2 forbidden item. It turns out it's not just suffocation, but also shadows. Watching the shadows wriggling, controlling the now destroyed corpses and attacking him once more, Ailin suddenly resolved his earlier doubts. These corpses were still ordinary corpses, devoid of any extraordinary powers. The true attackers were the shadows, controlled by the forbidden item, shadow of suffocation. Crack, crack, crack. Just as Ailin resolved his doubts, a series of teeth-grinding sounds of bones snapping echoed from the apartment building. Corpses, one after another, struggled to their feet in bizarre positions from every corner of the building. Each face, desperate for breath but unable to find it, was filled with despair, its suffocating faces brimming with pain and resentment, as if resenting their own body's inability to rest in peace even after death. At the feet or backs of each corpse, without exception, lay a suffocating, dark, ghostly shadow. Behind each of these suffocating shadows, a faint, gossamer thread connected the depths of the Pingan apartment. These faint, gossamer threads crisscrossed like a vast, woven spiderweb, carrying a suffocating, oppressive feeling of despair. They manipulated the long dead bodies one after another. With an eerie pace, their twisted forms surged from every corner of the apartment, attacking Ailin like a tide. Dozens, hundreds of corpses danced in a chaotic chaos, transforming the Pingan apartment into a gloomy hell on earth. Damn, are so many bodies possible just from 1 or 2 deaths a day, except for those already discovered, taken away, and buried. There are hundreds of bodies in this Pingan apartment alone. How many deaths have those damned politicians concealed? Ailin nearly cried out in curse as he watched the bodies, tearing their bodies unconsciously and stumbling from all directions. Without hesitation, Ailin sheathed his pistol. With a thought, he summoned the angel scepter sealed on his arm. While the pistol's bullets could blow the skulls off the corpses, they couldn't do any harm to the suffocating shadows controlling them. Rather than wasting bullets on these corpses, it would be better to summon something that could actually inflict damage on these creatures. Without a doubt, the angel scepter, infused with the afterglow of an angel's divinity and capable of doubling damage against evil creatures, was the perfect weapon Ailin had in hand to resolve this situation. Chapter 133 Eyes in the Dark. Under the control of the suffocating shadow, it wasn't long before the twisted corpses swarmed towards Ailin. As they drew closer, not only was the visual impact terrifying, but the oppressive feeling of suffocation grew stronger. The air, deprived of oxygen, seemed to twist into a vast, ghostly figure, commanding the surging tide of corpses, seemingly threatening to engulf Ailin. At that moment, a silvery white, gilded light surged from Ailin's right arm, swiftly converging before him into a massive scepter imbued with a sacred aura. Shock! Almost as soon as the scepter took shape, a sacred aura instantly swept over the entire area. Under the impact of this sacred aura, the already unstable, twisted, ghostly figure was instantly dispersed. Even the surging tide of corpses froze for a moment. Although the corpses quickly continued to move their limbs, charging towards Ailin in an eerie, crawling-like manner, they were only 3 steps slower. Bang! Empowered by giant strength, Ailin casually swung his massive metal angel staff, as tall as himself, and effortlessly ripped a nearby corpse, sending it flying, body and shadow alike. The immense power of the angel crushed the corpse's chest. The angel staff's inherent divine power, combined with its double damage to evil creatures, shattered the suffocating shadow controlling the corpse, permanently stunning it. Bang! 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 Wielding the angel staff, imbued with immense strength, Ailin effortlessly cleared a circle of corpses from around him. However, none of this brought the slightest hint of a smile to Ailin's face. While the power of the angel staff allowed Ailin to easily deal with the corpses controlled by the suffocating shadows, even shattering them, each swing of the angel staff also rapidly depleted Ailin's remaining oxygen. A normal person holding their breath underwater could hold their breath for 1 to 2 minutes. Specially trained professionals could even reach 10 or 20 minutes. Under normal circumstances, Ailin, while unable to hold their breath for 20 minutes like those trained professionals, was confident he could hold it for 10 or so. However, if holding his breath while engaged in intense combat, which rapidly depleted his oxygen supply, Ailin was unsure how much longer he could maintain it. With every passing minute and second, Ailin could clearly feel the suffocating sensation within the safe apartment building intensifying. Gradually, this suffocation became more than just a physical sensation of being unable to breathe. An invisible, intangible force constantly oppressed Ailin's will, causing him to feel a suffocating sensation. This invisible, intangible pressure was like dropping Ailin into the deep ocean. While choking his breath, the overwhelming water pressure squeezed out the remaining oxygen in his body, crushing his flesh while also oppressing his mind. No more delay. We must find that suffocating shadow, still in its infancy. As Ailin smashed another suffocating shadow with his staff, he made a swift decision. Following the faint threads emanating from above the suffocating shadows, Ailin quickly made his way deeper into Pingan apartment. Perhaps his movements had triggered the imminently forming level 2 forbidden object, or something else entirely. Seeing Ailin marching straight towards his hiding place, the twisted suffocating shadows around Ailin, as if stimulated by a frenzy, launched a suicidal attack on him. Meanwhile, some corpses tumbled and crawled around Ailin. Blocking Ailin's path, pale hands, emitting a foul smell, swung and clawed at every part of Ailin's body. Holy shield. In the next instant, a milky white holy shield radiating a holy glow appeared around Ailin, enveloping him from head to toe. As the pale hands, emitting a foul smell, struck the milky white holy shield, it was like butter hitting a red-hot iron plate, scorched black by the holy power of the holy shield. Some used too much force, even having half the rotten flesh on their hands completely burned away by the holy shield. Taking advantage of the holy shield's blocking effect, Ailin swung his angel's scepter, in a sweeping motion, clearing a passage through the dense mass of corpses. Following the passage he had finally cleared, Ailin swiftly ran deeper into Penguin Apartments. And behind him, a horrific group of corpses waved pale hands, clawing at Ailin's back. The scene seemed to form an eerie painting. Countless terrifying figures emerged from hell, waving ferocious claws, attempting to seize a figure radiating divine light and drag it into the abyss. Realizing time was running out, Ailin wasted no time and rushed directly into the depths of Penguin Apartment, to the 4th floor, which was filled with dense silk threads. Once inside, the narrow corridors of Penguin Apartment were pitch black, with almost no light. Even the moonlight and lights from the 4th floor window seemed unable to penetrate the pitch-black glass, illuminating the deadly silence of this floor. Aided by the faint white light of the angel scepter, Ailin's spiritual vision barely captured the dense shadows and phantoms pouring into room 404 on this floor. Room 404? Seeing the slightly reflective door number, Ailin was momentarily taken aback. This number was truly ominous. As Ailin watched, the doorway to room 404, already radiating an ominous aura, had opened a gap, half a finger's width. Through this gap, Ailin could clearly see the threads controlling the suffocating shadows, flowing from this very crack in the doorway. And behind those threads, room 404 held a darkness even darker than the darkness of the corridor. As Ailin peered through the gap, a pair of bloodshot eyes suddenly emerged from the darkness of room 404. Chapter 134. Thank you. The moment those crimson eyes appeared, goosebumps instantly spread across Ailin's body, and every hair stood on end. As Ailin's eyes met those crimson ones, a suffocating despair, channeled through Ailin's gaze, transcended space, passed through the barrier of the holy shield, and descended directly into Ailin's heart. The surging despair, like a suffocating tide, instantly poured into Ailin's heart, threatening to drown it with suffocating despair and contaminate his soul. Buzz! At that moment, the angel staff in Ailin's hand trembled slightly. A stream of milky white light flowed from Ailin's hands, where they touched the angel staff, and flowed into Ailin's body. The milky white light flowed through Ailin's body, bringing a warmth like a mother's embrace. This warmth warmed Ailin's slightly stiff body and dispelled the suffocating despair that threatened to overwhelm him. The warmth from the angel staff was a buffer. Ailin quickly cut off his gaze from the crimson eyes and constructed layer after layer of mental defense within his mind. After preparing himself, Ailin rushed towards room 404 without hesitation. Bang! He kicked the door open with a fierce kick. Ailin spotted a dark figure standing at the edge of the window, silently watching Ailin as he kicked the door open. Beyond the eerie crimson eyes, the dark figure was composed entirely of countless tangled, writhing black threads. The thin threads wielding the figures outside, controlling the corpses, emanated from these threads. It was these hundreds of black threads that wove together the suffocating hellish nightmare that was Penguin Apartment. Simultaneously, the dark figure continuously absorbed the suffocating despair from all directions, transforming it into nourishment, constantly nourishing itself. Ailin's arrival. The dark figure seemed to have been stimulated, frantically absorbing the despair surrounding it, attempting to use this despair as nourishment to accelerate its complete formation. However, a level 2 forbidden item clearly wasn't so easily formed. Is this the suffocating shadow? Waving the angel's staff, he tore through the black threads that attempted to entangle him. Ailin, holding the angel's staff in his hand, strode towards the dark figure. Strike it while it's weak. Currently, the level 2 forbidden item, suffocating shadow, hadn't yet fully formed. Taking advantage of this moment to completely eliminate it was a quick and easy solution. Ailin, who happened to have a weapon like the angel's staff that countered suffocating shadow, naturally wouldn't pass up this opportunity. Room 404 wasn't large. Ailin strode quickly, closing the distance between him and the suffocating shadow. Countless threads emerged from the suffocating shadow along the way, attempting to block him, but they were all severed by the angel staff radiating a holy light. Just as Ailin was less than 3 meters from the black figure, and just one more step would allow him to strike with the angel staff, the dark figure, composed of writhing black lines, suddenly moved. Its two eerie crimson pupils instantly detached from the dark figure and, like meteors, suddenly shot towards Ailin. Ailin, sensing danger, felt provoked, a flash of anger in his eyes. He fully activated the angel staff's two abilities, protection, giant strength. Unleashing the full might of the angel staff, he constructed a finger-thick holy light shield around himself. Then, wielding the massive angel staff, Ailin slammed down at the two hurtling crimson pupils. The angel staff, radiating divine light, and the eerie, blood-stained crimson pupils suddenly collided in front of Ailin. Boom! With a sudden burst of brilliant white light, a blazing silver-white flame erupted from the angel staff, instantly engulfing the entire room. In a split second, the table, bed, sofa, chairs, even the concrete walls, everything in room 404 was reduced to ash in the searing white light imbued with divine presence. At the edge of room 404's window, the dark figure remained motionless before the blazing white light that seemed to incinerate everything in the world. It allowed the blazing white light, emitting a terrifying temperature, to climb over its body, gradually burning away the black threads that covered it. As more and more black threads were reduced to ash by the blazing flames, a thin, translucent figure gradually emerged from the endless black threads. As the blazing flames nearly reduced the black lines on his body, along with most of his body, to ash, the amber eyes of the thin, translucent figure seemed to regain a hint of clarity. He watched the white flames spread across his body, and the horrific pain emanating from his soul. A voice of relief emanated from the thin, translucent figure. Finally, am I finally free? Realizing his soul was about to be shattered, the translucent figure showed no sign of panic, but instead let out a heartfelt smile. He turned to Ailin, who held the angel's scepter, and thanked him. Thank you for not letting me become that monster. I've already lost everything, and I have nothing to thank you for. I'll give you the power of that monster. As he spoke, a faint shadow at the translucent figure's feet stretched out, then slowly merged into Ailin's shadow. The shadow's movement wasn't very fast, and Ailin could easily have dodged it if he had wanted to. Even worse, plunging the angel's scepter into the shadow might even completely shatter it. But watching the smiling figure vanish amidst the blazing white flames, Ailin ultimately abandoned the thought. He allowed the two shadows behind him, one large and one small, to slowly approach and eventually merge. As the two shadows completely merged, the translucent figure was completely incinerated into nothingness by the milky white holy flames. At the same time, an unfamiliar, fragmented message emerged from the dim shadow, and Ailin absorbed it. Chapter 135 Real Suffocation. In those fragmented memories, Ailin seemed to experience that man's brief yet tragic life firsthand. He was born into an ordinary family in Chinatown, his parents both Chinese immigrants who had smuggled themselves into the Commonwealth. While not wealthy, they managed to get by thanks to their hard work. Busy with work and lacking parental supervision, Ailin spent his school years focused on play and games. He wasn't particularly inattentive, but he simply couldn't get into a prestigious university like the top students in his class. After graduating from an ordinary community college, thanks to his parents' money and connections, he found a job at a Chinatown factory. His fluent speaking skills led him to transfer to the factory's sales department, where he met several major clients and secured several large orders. With some financial resources to continue, he met his love at the factory. Naturally, they married, had children, and gradually started their own family. But just as he was about to live an ordinary life like his parents, disaster struck. After get off work, he went to the supermarket to buy a beer and head home to relax. His father was struck and killed by a pair of marijuana-addled black men in a stolen family car while recklessly racing down the street. They were poor black men, and they ultimately offered no compensation or apology. They were charged with hit and run and manslaughter. Legally, they should have received 5 years in prison, but due to the intense racial tensions and frequent black riots at the time, the jury, considering racial factors and the need to quell social unrest, only sentenced them to 1 year in prison, suspended for 2 years. As for the combined $20,000 in compensation, it was obvious that those two poor black men couldn't afford it. After his father's death, his mother fell into depression and soon became ill from overwork. As a son, he naturally felt responsible for paying for his mother's treatment. He hadn't expected the cost to be so high, but fortunately, with his savings from previous years, he could still afford it. He could earn his money back if he worked hard for a few years. However, he hadn't anticipated that, just around this time, the factory he'd been working for, which had been generating decent profits, would go bankrupt due to a supply disruption. Consequently, he was unable to deliver goods on the agreed date, resulting in a hefty fine. With the factory closed, he was forced to look for a new job, but the new one wasn't very welcoming. The owner, with a vast workforce to choose from due to the closure of his old one, was desperately trying to undercut his wages. The salary he was offered was less than half of his previous salary, and the benefits he should have received were also reduced to a minimum. With his once glorious career, he certainly wouldn't give in. After struggling for a few months at the new factory, seeing himself working tirelessly for less than half of his former salary, he angrily resigned. He'd assumed that his abilities would allow him to quickly find a better job after leaving the new factory. However, reality dealt him a harsh blow. It was as if he'd been cursed. He found new jobs again and again, only to leave again soon for one reason or another. Some were voluntary, some were passive. Some were high-paying, some were low-paying. But no matter what job, he couldn't last more than 3 months. With each job he quit. The savings he'd accumulated were quickly depleted. Then came credit card advances, one after another, all emptied out. He earned less and less, but his expenses grew. His mother's medical bills, his child's milk powder, living expenses, daily necessities, and other household expenses, everything required money. The burden of life formed a suffocating pressure, trying to crush him. But he didn't give in. Instead, he worked harder and harder, toiling away like a madman. But in this world, hard work doesn't guarantee reward, and hard work doesn't guarantee happiness. Just when his income was starting to improve slightly from his frantic 3-job stint, fate dealt him another blow. He fell ill. The long hours of toil had finally broken his frail body. To cure him, his family had exhausted the little savings they had painstakingly accumulated during his recent bout of madness, even going into debt. Just as he found a new job, buoyed by the promise of a fresh start, his mother's illness relapsed. That evening, having just paid the last balance on his credit card and leaving the hospital, he learned from the police that his wife had been shot by a stray bullet from a robbery gang while returning from the restaurant where she worked. Fortunately, his wife survived, but unfortunately, his credit card had no funds left to pay for treatment. At the hospital checkout counter, he knelt and kowtowed to the doctors, desperately begging them to save his wife. But they coldly told him they could only follow the hospital's rules and regulations. Without money, surgery could not be arranged. Fortunately, his wife's parents arrived in time, paid the surgery fee, and saved his wife. But they also didn't want their daughter to live with him, living in such a precarious life, with no food to eat. They filed for divorce, and he agreed. After emerging from the operating table, his wife's first words were for him to hurry back and take the child to the hospital. It turned out that his child had also run a high fever that evening. His wife had rushed home from work, intending to take the child to the hospital. Looking at the empty balance on his credit card, he was overcome by a deep sense of powerlessness. He had no money left. Finally, his wife's parents brought the child to the hospital, but at the same time, they pressured him to sign the divorce papers. Leaving the hospital again, he wandered the streets in a daze, his eyes drained of their last glimmer of light. Returning to his apartment, he gazed at the family photo of 5 on the table. It was as if the last cord within him snapped. Suddenly, he embraced the photo, weeping bitterly. At that moment, 2 crimson rays, drawn to his suffocating despair, descended from the void and sank into his body. After witnessing that man's tragic life, Ailin's expression was complicated. It turns out that what is really suffocating is not the unbreathable air, but the hopeless life. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136, Shadow of the Hydra. At the same time, Ailin also learned what a man, overwhelmed by pain and despair, had finally gifted him. It was a fragment of the second-level forbidden item, Suffocating Shadow. This incomplete version of Suffocating Shadow was certainly not a forbidden item. In fact, It was significantly inferior to the original suffocating shadow when it was still in its infancy. The function of this fragment of suffocating shadow was simple. It could sink into the opponent's shadow, drowning the shadow and causing the opponent's true body to die of suffocation. Or, if the opponent lost consciousness or died, it could control the opponent's body or corpse. Of course, although the function of this incomplete version of suffocating shadow was simple, it was not weak. In this extraordinary and hidden world, unless it encountered some special individuals, this ability was enough to kill 99% of the world's population. Of course, since it was a missing version of suffocating shadow, it certainly had certain flaws. One of them was photophobia. In strong light, not only would the suffocating shadow's abilities be weakened in all aspects, but it might even be forced to leave the opponent's shadow. In addition, this incomplete version of suffocating shadow had serious side effects. Carrying the suffocating shadow for extended periods can lead to unconsciousness and a certain chance of death from suffocation. Watching the gradually extinguished white flames in the room and the translucent figure shattered within them, Ailin sighed and quickly turned and left. Without the suffocating shadow that infested the apartment, absorbing despair, the safe apartment was now much like any other, save for a few more corpses. Aside from the piles of fallen bodies, the trapped air could now be breathed. After carefully clearing his traces of presence within the safe apartment, Ailin quickly left the building. A siren slowly began to sound nearby. Shortly after, when officers from the NYPD's Chinatown precinct arrived at the safe apartment, they saw the densely packed remains of over 100 bodies. Their faces instantly turned grim. With such heavy casualties within their jurisdiction, both they and their superiors were in serious trouble. Ailin was unaware of the current troubles of the Chinatown, New York branch. He was leisurely sipping coffee with his alter ego at a 24-hour maid cafe. Putting down his slightly bitter coffee, Ailin, the clown, now dressed in a tuxedo, his attire and appearance becoming increasingly different from his original self, curled his lips and sneered disdainfully, "I didn't expect that big guy Kingpin to be more patient than I thought. I've already destroyed 12 of his strongholds with fireworks and have almost wiped out most of his influence in Hell's Kitchen, and yet he's still hiding in the shadows." Ailin, the clown, had been busy during that period. He'd been destroying one or two of Kingpin's Dark Empire strongholds in Hell's Kitchen or affiliated forces almost daily. But under these circumstances, apart from issuing a wanted order for the clown who had challenged him, Kingpin showed no sign of appearing. Even his own general, Bullseye, hadn't been deployed. This bizarre situation left the clone unsure of Kingpin's true intentions. However, it clearly defied common sense. Why bother? Wouldn't it be better to simply locate Kingpin through divination? Or even a paper crane would work. Divination? Paper cranes? Clown Ailin's lips curved into an exaggerated arc as he stubbornly said, "No way. That's pointless. Don't worry, I won't waste too much time." Seeing the playful cat and mouse play in Ailin's eyes, Ailin shook his head. "Alright, as long as you're happy." With that, Ailin gently stomped his right foot against his own shadow. Immediately, a slender figure emerged from Ailin's shadow and disappeared into Ailin's. Ailin's purpose in meeting his clone was to hand over the suffocating shadow to Ailin. Shortly after the suffocating shadow merged with his own shadow, Ailin noticed that his angel scepter seemed to be strongly repelled by it. If it weren't for the suppression, the angel scepter might have leaped out, and a burst of holy flames instantly purified the suffocating shadow that had sank into Ailin's shadow. Seeing this, Ailin quickly contacted his clone, intending to transfer the suffocating shadow to the clown's body. Feeling the transformation brought about by the suffocating shadow's integration into his own shadow, Ailin the clown's eyes lit up. He smiled with joy, like someone who had just received a beloved toy. This suffocating shadow fragment has considerable power. If used wisely, it will surely bring you unexpected benefits. Of course, be mindful of its side effects. I don't want you to be resurrected by suffocation one day. In addition to the suffocating shadow fragment, Ailin also handed the cursed scarecrow he had retrieved from the safe, as well as the crystal eye that his clone had specifically requested. After handing over these extraordinary items, Ailin left the maid cafe directly. Meanwhile, in a secret base that had been renamed SHIELD, Crossbones Lock Rimlow was frowning as he looked at a document in his hand. Character codename, Joker. Gender, male. Real name, unknown. Abilities, possessing extremely advanced shooting and fighting abilities. Notes, suspected of possessing some kind of extraordinary abilities. Personality. The document in Crossbone's hand was very detailed. From Ailin the Joker's first appearance to every Dark Empire hideout of Kingpin that he had recently destroyed in Hell's Kitchen, there were clear records on it. Even Ailin the Joker's current residence was marked out. Looking at the information in his hand, Crossbones said to the figure in front of him, "What do you want me to do? This clown destroyed a lot of Kingpin's business in Hell's Kitchen. Not long ago, Kingpin came to me and hoped that we could help him solve this problem. He even paid a hefty price for it." Crossbones raised his eyebrows when he heard this. "You want me to help that gang leader?" "No, what I want is something from that clown. According to the information we've obtained, it was he who took away Ironmonger Rumlow's head that day. We need that head." Chapter 137. It seems that there are guests at home. After the night battle on the streets of New York, not only did Tony Stark earn the title of Iron Man, but SHIELD also seized the opportunity to obtain the remains of Ironmonger. Initially, SHIELD and Hydra, hidden within SHIELD, believed they could reverse engineer the manufacturing technology for Ironmonger, a massive battlefield-dominating weapon, from the existing Ironmonger's husk. This allowed them to mass-produce the Ironmonger. However, reality proved their assumptions were entirely unfounded. Although they had recreated a brand new, undamaged Ironmonger, equipped with a variety of weapons, without the arc reactor, its energy core, and the subsystems replicated from Jarvis's body, its high-performance operating system, this Iron Mech, weighing tens of tons and costing an exorbitant price, was effectively nothing more than a pile of scrap metal. SHIELD and Hydra, hidden within SHIELD, who had spent so much money only to receive nothing but scrap metal, were naturally unwilling to accept this. Soon, some people attributed the missing key technology core to Ironmonger's missing head. Therefore, after extensive analysis and investigation, the Joker, who had taken Ironmonger's head that day, quickly came into their sights. Coincidentally, Kingpin, who had already been collaborating with Hydra, approached them, offering a high price to have Hydra's agents eliminate the Joker, who had caused him to lose a significant portion of his Hell's Kitchen business and suffer heavy losses. Hydra, already intent on dealing with the Joker, naturally accepted the offer of US dollars. Ironmonger's head, recalling the video footage of Ironmonger, glaring down like a weapon of war, a glint of heat flashed in Crossbones Rumlow's eyes. "I understand. I'll bring back Ironmonger's head, of course. I'm convinced of that." After a pause, the figure in front of Crossbones said, "By the way, this Joker is suspected of possessing extraordinary abilities. Therefore, for this mission, I've granted you temporary access to the Winter Soldier. He'll assist you." Hearing that the Winter Soldier, a weapon of war, would be assisting him, a hint of a smile crossed Crossbones' face, further bolstering his confidence. Elsewhere, in the maid cafe, Clown Ailin fiddled with a crystal eye. Something occurred to him, and a wicked smile crossed his face. Just then, his nose twitched, and he sneezed violently several times. Rubbing his itchy nose, a chill gradually filled Ailin's eyes. "Does this feel like someone is plotting against me?" The Joker, possessing powerful divination abilities and a profound control over his facial muscles, certainly wouldn't sneeze for no reason. Except for special circumstances like a cold. Every sneeze the clown sneezed was a spiritual warning. Fate, in some mysterious way, silently reminded him. "Interesting, is that Kingpin? He's been silent for so long, it's time for him to make a move." After pocketing the cursed scarecrow and the crystal eye, the clown Ailin adjusted his black head and leisurely returned to Hell's Kitchen. Shortly after entering Hell's Kitchen, Ailin's steps seemed to pause for a moment. A smile flickered across his face, and after slightly adjusting his hat, he walked off to the side of the road. A few seconds later, two burly men glanced at Ailin, not far away, then followed him silently. A few minutes later, as they passed a relatively quiet path, Ailin turned and headed down an alley. Seeing this, the two men behind Ailin quickened their pace and turned into the alley. "Where's the person? Why is he gone?" The two men exchanged glances, gazing at the blocked alleyway and the littered ground. Realizing something was amiss, they were about to exit the alley when a faint voice suddenly rang out overhead. "Hey, are you looking for me?" Hearing the voice overhead, the two men instinctively looked up, feeling as if they were facing a formidable enemy. But as soon as they did, their vision was consumed by a series of dreamlike afterimages and a terrifying gaze that looked down from above. Despairing gaze instantly destroyed the men's mental defenses. Clown Ailin's legs, entwined with a thread of resentment, loosened, and he fell from their heads. He removed an earphone from each man's ear and crushed it with force. Ailin once again channeled the power of the Great Seal of the Mind and inquired about their origins. He also began to feel around their bodies. Aside from various documents bearing various names, Ailin only found a single photo of each of them. Ailin threw away the stack of documents without even taking them. After all, they were mostly fake, and even if Ailin took them, they would be useless. As for the 2 photos of himself in their hands, he destroyed them on the spot. After extracting what he wanted from them, Ailin the clown pointed his finger, and the long hungry threads of resentment and love sacrificed the 2 men, body and soul. Puff, puff, almost instantly, the 2 men who had been following Ailin were devoured by the thin threads of resentment and love, turning them into ash and dissipating before Ailin's eyes. Destroying the bodies, this ability is quite convenient, taking advantage of the moment when, desperate gaze, destroyed their mental defenses. Ailin used hypnosis to obtain a considerable amount of information from the 2 men. These 2 men carrying so many fake documents were not assassins hired by Kingpin, but agents sent by Hydra. According to their explanation, the purpose of their visit this time was to kill the Joker and take back the head of Ironmonger from him. With a thing and relying on Hydra's technology, they would be able to overcome all the problems with Ironmonger sooner or later and replicate the huge Ironmonger. Maybe they could become the next hero who piloted mechas like Iron Man. Huh, Hydra? Do you really think you are a soft persimmon? Shaking his head, the corners of Clown Ailin's mouth curled up again as he walked to his temporary residence that was burned by smoke and fire. It seems like there are guests at home. Chapter 138 The Incredible Crossbones. He raised his head slightly. Clown Ailin's pupils, suddenly turning a deep black, seemed to peer through the smoke-stained brick wall and see the uninvited guests. Seeing each distinct aura, the corners of Ailin's mouth widened, forming an exaggerated arc. Wow, quite a few people. Guess I'll have to treat these guests well. He pulled a piece of wire, which he had broken into a key, from his pocket and inserted it into the doorway, fiddling with it for a moment. With a faint click, Ailin grabbed the door handle. Behind the door, 4 Hydra agents, huddled against the wall, holding their breath, heard the door handle turn. Their eyes fixed on each other as they heard it. They carefully aimed their silenced pistols at the door that was about to open. These Hydra agents were wary of this mysterious figure who had single-handedly destroyed numerous gang strongholds controlled by Kingpin and even held his own against Iron Man. Just as they were staring intently at the door, a faint voice suddenly echoed from behind them. Hey, what are you looking at? The 4 S.H.I.E.L.D. agents' pupils shrank sharply at the sudden arrival of the unfamiliar voice. They spun around at top speed, turning their guns towards their backs. Puff, 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 4 faint puffs echoed. The 4 Hydra agents' heads froze, and a thin stream of blood oozed from their necks. A sneer crossed Ailin's face as he watched the 4 Hydra agents, who had, due to excessive force, slammed their necks against the sharp venomous threads and then severed their own heads. Upon discovering the Hydra agents, intent on waiting behind the door, Ailin deliberately pulled out a homemade wire key to open the door. The sound of the door opening attracted their attention, and Ailin swiftly turned. Through a nearby window, which had been damaged by the fire, he silently entered the first floor of the house and wrapped the venomous threads around their necks. After doing this, Ailin quietly greeted the Hydra agents. Who knew that, in their excitement, the Hydra agents accidentally severed their own heads, performing a head-cutting tribute to Ailin the Clown. The stench of blood rushed into his nostrils, and Clown Ailin shrugged, seeming to resent the Hydra agent's blood stinking his carefully chosen smoky air residence. With a flick of his finger, the venomous threads entwined within his fingertips suddenly unleashed their force, instantly devouring the flesh and souls of his prey. Not even the splattered blood escaped to him. It was as if he feared the filthy blood would contaminate his master's beautifully decorated house, now ravaged beyond recognition. After warmly hospiting the 4 guests, allowing them to escape a long day's toil, completely freeing their weary bodies and strained souls, and finally enter a long sleep, Ailin's gaze drifted to the staircase leading to the 2nd floor. There, several more important guests awaited his entertainment. After dispatching the 4 gatekeepers, the clown, Ailin, walked briskly up the stairs. He made no effort to conceal his steps, so the S.H.I.E.L.D. agent stationed there immediately heard the sounds coming from the stairwell. Upon hearing the footsteps, a Hydra captain with azure eyes frowned, thinking unhappily. What are those guys doing? The Joker is already at the door. They're running upstairs now. Isn't that a clear sign that there's an ambush? Just as he was about to reprimand the men who had come running up from the ground floor, a figure wearing a clown mask, with brisk steps, ascended the stairs unnoticed. Upon seeing the masked figure, the Hydra captain paused, then realized something. "Go!" the Hydra team leader shouted at the elite Hydra agents ambushed on the second floor, then raised his Uzi submachine gun and aimed it at Ailin's body. The 4 Hydra agents on the first floor, intent on ambushing the Joker, were stationed at the entrance. The fact that Ailin the Joker could walk from the first to the second floor unnoticed meant that his 4 men's fate was self-evident. Bang, bang, bang. Before the Hydra team leader could pull the trigger on Ailin the Joker, the specially formulated, high-powered bullets from the M500 revolver blew his head off. In the process, Ailin also blew the heads of the other 4 Hydra agents, who hadn't reacted yet. "Wow, this is disgusting." Looking at the second floor, splattered with red and white, Ailin's eyes flashed with disdain. This house was so filthy, it looked like it was uninhabitable. Just as Clown Ailin, with a look of disdain, began to consider moving, the thunderous crack of an M500 revolver instantly alerted the other Hydra agents lurking in various corners of the house. In the only room that had been cleared, Crossbones Lock Rumlow caressed the Ironmonger's head, which had been casually placed in a corner by Clown Ailin, his face filled with disbelief. He had assumed he would need to capture the clown and, through torture and interrogation, extract the whereabouts of the Ironmonger's head. However, he had no idea that he would find the Ironmonger's head, casually placed in a corner, just after entering the house and before even meeting the clown himself. In this very room, he saw the Ironmonger's head, placed haphazardly. Upon first seeing it, Crossbones Lock Rumlow thought it was a trap set by the clown. But after much effort and careful probing, he realized that the head was indeed there. He realized that all his previous attempts had been a battle of wits with the air. The Ironmonger's head, so highly prized by S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra, seemed like just an ordinary trophy to the Joker. He simply stored it away in his own residence, without even taking any defensive measures. Chapter 139 Winter Soldier. Had they known it was so easy, Hydra would have sent someone to infiltrate the house and steal the Ironmonger's head long ago, even if they were stealing. Why would they have waited until now, when he and the Winter Soldier, along with a large group of men, arrived with such fanfare to ambush the Joker, only to stumble upon the Ironmonger's head, peacefully lying in the corner of the room? Just as Crossbones Rumlow picked up Ironmonger's head and was about to leave with it, a series of deafening gunshots and the sounds of intense fire from downstairs erupted. "Huh?" Crossbones frowned at the sound of the gunfire, tightening his grip around the Ironmonger's head. The resounding gunfire resembled the crackle of an M500 revolver. It seemed the Joker had returned. As Hydra's ace agent with an SHIELD, Crossbones Rumlow was no slouch. Even from 2 floors away, he recognized the distinctive sound of the M500 revolver almost immediately upon hearing the gunshot. "Huh? M500?" Crossbones Lock Rumlow let out a sneer. While the M500 was powerful, its magazine capacity was far too small for an agent. Humans weren't like those resilient beasts. A bullet fired from a Groglo was just as lethal as an M500. So why sacrifice magazine capacity for a meager 5 rounds? Instead, they'd have to constantly change ammunition for that limited capacity, adding a significant amount of uncertainty. Shaking his head dismissively, Crossbones turned to the Winter Soldier, whose face was half obscured by a mask, his eyes as calm as a pool of still water, and ordered, "I'll take Ironmonger's head back first. You go kill the Joker." Nodding expressionlessly, the Winter Soldier, his weapon slung over his shoulder, headed for the 3rd floor, where the intense fighting was taking place. Meanwhile, Crossbones, known as Lock Rumlow, led 2 of his men toward the rooftop of the small building. He planned to take advantage of the Winter Soldier's battle with the Joker to enter the adjacent building and escape. Crossbones was more concerned with the Ironmonger's head than with the Joker. He didn't want it to be damaged in the fight with the Joker. Just as Crossbones was about to leave, a powerful bullet slammed into the stairs in front of him, blasting a large dent in the concrete. Sputtering cement shards struck Crossbones' face, stinging it. "I haven't even treated you properly yet? Why are you leaving? Are you looking down on us?" Watching the bullet grazed him, Crossbones knew it was a warning from the Joker. Otherwise, with the Joker's proficiency with a gun, the bullet might have gone far beyond simply hitting the staircase in front of him. Although Crossbones knew the Joker, Ailin, had likely held back, a wave of intense anger and fear still welled up within him. Ailin's bullet had narrowly missed Ironmonger's head. With the power of the M500, who knew how much damage it would have caused, and how difficult it would have been for Hydra to repair the skull later? With this thought, Crossbones turned to the Winter Soldier, who had already reached the stairs, and coldly ordered, "Kill him." Yes, upon receiving the order, the Winter Soldier reached the stairs, raised his shotgun, and fired 2 shots into the hallway below. With the roar of the gunfire, the small pellets in the shotgun shells instantly exploded, covering a large area of the hallway. This widespread attack forced even the clown, Ailin, to dodge trouble. After avoiding the shotgun's range, Ailin, who was hiding behind cover, moved his fingers. A thread of resentment, imbued with spirituality, instantly wrapped around the Winter Soldier, who stood at the stairwell, like a nimble venomous snake. "Get down." With a sudden, forceful tug, Ailin pulled the Winter Soldier, who was standing at the 4th floor landing, back down the stairs. Caught off guard, the Winter Soldier's face remained calm. As he tumbled, he took the opportunity to unbuckle a grenade and flung it in the direction of the force. "Get back." Without waiting for the grenade to fall, the threads of resentment entwined with the Winter Soldier shrank, quickly forming a small net in midair, enveloping the grenade. With a powerful swing, he swung the grenade in the opposite direction, towards the 4th floor stairwell. Boom! A violent explosion followed. A massive hole was blasted through the already battered 4th floor. Crossbones and his men were also covered in dust from the grenade's blast. Seizing this opportunity, the Joker, Ailin, flashed and dashed in front of the Winter Soldier with a unique gait. Seeing the Joker charging towards him, the Winter Soldier, who had just risen from the ground, raised his robotic left arm and punched Ailin in front of him. The Winter Soldier's robotic left arm was a high-tech Hydra product. Not only does it greatly enhance the Winter Soldier's strength, granting him mechanical strength far beyond that of an ordinary human, it also acts as a small shield, protecting him from incoming fire. Facing this punch imbued with mechanical power, Ailin showed no resistance, easily dodging the sharp blow with a sideways movement. Ailin's eyes met the Winter Soldier's. The mental shock of death stare, like a thunderous explosion, instantly exploded within the Winter Soldier's mind. Even his brain, washed by Dr. Zola's control, was shattered by the terrifying mental impact of death stare. "You're still not unconscious." Seeing the Winter Soldier swaying slightly on the ground and struggling to get up, Ailin was slightly surprised and fired another death stare at the Winter Soldier's head. If one shot didn't work, 2 would do. After all, Ailin wasn't lacking the mental power of death stare right now. Crack! With another despairing stare, Ailin blasted a massive hole in the Winter Soldier's mental control. His eyes became dazed and confused. At the same time, Ailin continuously mobilized his own psychic power, launching a fatal attack on the Winter Soldier. Chapter 140. You are not allowed to take what I don't give you. The moment the third death stare fell, Winter Soldier Bucky Barnes' mind was completely confused and turned into a mess, let alone continuing to follow orders. The Winter Soldier now couldn't even tell who he was. The Joker's death stare completely destroyed the Winter Soldier's mental will, and at the same time, it also broke the mental control of Dr. Zola of Hydra over the Winter Soldier, as well as the brainwashing of many Hydra hypnotists on Winter Soldier Bucky Barnes day and night. His will returned to its original state. A large number of memory fragments kept flashing in the Winter Soldier's mind. Among these memory fragments, there were childhood memories of his parents, there were his experiences growing up with Captain America, Steve Rogers, there was the trepidation of entering the battlefield for the first time, the confusion of facing the hail of bullets, and the growth he experienced after experiencing the brutality of war. There was also the despair of falling off the cliff of the icy valley, and the days and nights of hypnosis and brainwashing after being secretly rescued by Hydra, even the cold memories of being trained by Hydra as a killing weapon. The Winter Soldier remembered them all. Countless fragments of memory intertwined, flashing before his eyes at a constant high frequency. He could no longer distinguish whether he was Bucky Barnes, a Federation soldier, or the Winter Soldier of Hydra. With a shrill roar, Bucky Barnes, already mentally fragile after withstanding 3 of Ailin's despairing stare, finally succumbed to the high-frequency stimulation of the memory fragments and fainted, clutching his head in agony. It happened in a flash. Barely a second had passed since the Winter Soldier appeared at the stairwell and launched his attack on Ailin the Clown. The Winter Soldier, considered Hydra's trump card, had been knocked unconscious by Ailin. Meanwhile, Crossbones and the others, caught in the grenade Ailin had thrown back on the 4th floor, had just scrambled to their feet. Waste, Crossbones Rocco Rumlow cursed the Winter Soldier inwardly, peering through the gaping hole created by the grenade as he watched the clown dispatch the Winter Soldier so swiftly. At the same time, Crossbones Rumlow felt a surge of extreme wariness towards the man in the clown mask. If he could swiftly dispatch the Winter Soldier, whose combat prowess surpassed his, he could also dispatch him just as swiftly. Thinking of this, Crossbones Rumlow, clutching Ironmonger's head, ran towards the rooftop above the 4th floor without hesitation. As he ran, Crossbones Rumlow shouted, "Cover me!" Though fearful, these well-trained Hydra agents unhesitatingly drew their pistols and opened fire at the Joker below. To be carefully selected by Hydra, these agents possessed exceptional marksmanship. 5 or 6 Hydra agents fired simultaneously, their rapid bursts creating a hail of bullets. Dodging the relentless onslaught of bullets, showering the ground with sparks, Joker Ailin flicked his wrist. A brand new deck of cards appeared in his hand. Deal, his slender fingers lightly touched the deck, and the deck underwent a mysterious transformation, becoming even more dangerous. With a flick of his finger, the gleaming cards spun like knives, roaring out from his fingertips, tracing a white arc through the air as if the very air itself had been cut. It instantly pierced a Hydra agent's forehead. The Hydra agent's death wasn't the end, but rather the beginning of a visual feast. With a flick of his wrist, the clown, Ailin, effortlessly flung playing cards, one after another, carelessly flying. A whirring sound echoed throughout the room. Those ordinary cards, in Ailin's hands, seemed to transform into the sharpest blades. From the gaping hole in the 4th floor, blasted by the grenade, they scattered like flowers, scattering like a fairy, toward the 4th floor, where the Hydra agents were engulfed. Puff, puff, each flash of icy light swiftly tore through the specialized protective suits, leaving deep wounds visible to the bone on the Hydra agents' bodies. Some cards even severed the strongest bones. At that moment, countless cards spun wildly, impaling the 7 or 8 Hydra agents on the 4th floor like hedgehogs. Even Crossbones Rumlow, who had clung to Ironmonger's head and attempted to flee the building to the rooftop, had his throat slit by a Joker card. He clutched his neck and collapsed in a pool of blood. He scanned the surroundings with his clairvoyance. After detecting no other auras, the clown, Ailin, ascended the stairs from the 3rd floor to the 4th with brisk steps. He then reached Crossbones Rumlow, who lay slumped on the 4th floor, a look of resignation on his face. Crossbones Rumlow's outstretched hand was only a few dozen centimeters away from the door to the 5th floor rooftop. It seemed that if Crossbones Rumlow took one more step forward, he would escape the constraints of fate and push open the rusted steel door. "You've found out my whereabouts so clearly. It seems your intelligence skills are pretty good, don't you? It's just a pity that instead of being a good Hydra agent, you've got to pick on me. Are you guys sick of not dying fast enough?" After kicking the Ironmonger's head, which was tightly held in the arms of Crossbones Rumlow, aside, Clown Ailin reached out and swung a Joker-printed card between Crossbones' eyebrows. Seeing the Joker card stuck between Crossbones' eyebrows, Ailin nodded in satisfaction. Then he squatted down and said calmly to the dead Crossbones Rumlow, "Next time you reincarnate, if you meet me again, remember this, you are not allowed to take my things unless I give them to you." Clown Ailin studied Ironmonger's head for several days but couldn't find anything useful, so he casually tossed it into the corner of the room. "But, don't wait, I'll post a chapter tonight. I'll make up the chapter at 2 a.m. tomorrow at noon." Chapter 141 Bucky Wants to Die. Having failed to discover anything useful with Ironmonger's head, Clown Ailin, having lost interest, tossed it carelessly into a corner of the room. But his possessions belonged only to him, forever. Even if he forgot them forever, Ailin would not allow them to be stolen by a bunch of thieves. At the moment Crossbones Rumlow was completely dead, a clear notification chimed in Ailin's mind. Ding, the host killed the supporting character Crossbones Rumlow, slightly altering the course of fate. The power of destiny gathered within him was partially intercepted by the scales of fate before returning to the river of fate to give birth to a new supporting character, gaining 500 destiny points. Ailin, who had just returned home, was momentarily stunned by the notification. Only after sharing the memories transmitted from his clone did he understand what had happened since his clone's return. After a moment's deliberation, Ailin finally recalled who this Crossbones Rumlow was. Recalling who he was, Ailin felt a bit of helplessness. Come to think of it, Crossbones is a well-known character after all. How come he only has so few fate points? Less than 1/6 of Obadiah's. It's unbecoming of his Hydra identity, of course. Despite his frustration, Ailin's face still managed to smile slightly at the sight of the extra 500 fate points. Not bad. Another 500 fate points would allow for another 10-shot burst. Elsewhere, after clearing out all the Hydra agents, Ailin the Joker returned to the 3rd floor. He looked at the unconscious Winter Soldier, Bucky Barnes, and took out his freshly loaded M500 rifle, wielding it against Bucky's head a few times, as if trying to decide where to shoot. Killing Crossbones Lock Rimlow would earn him 500 fate points, so killing the Winter Soldier would surely earn him even more. Just as the muzzle of the Joker's rifle pointed directly at the Winter Soldier's forehead, Bucky Barnes's eyelids twitched, and then he instantly opened them. Surprisingly, at the approaching muzzle, Bucky Barnes, who had instinctively tried to resist, rolled his eyes slightly, as if realizing something, then gave up and closed them again. The moment Bucky Barnes closed his eyes, Joker's eyes caught a glimpse of a deathly intent mingled with pain and regret. Huh? What the hell? I haven't even started, and you're already thinking about death? Seeing this, Joker's eyes were immediately displeased. He lowered the muzzle of his M500 and slapped Bucky Barnes in the face, forcing him to open his eyes again. Winter Soldier Bucky Barnes, forcibly awakened by a slap from Clown Ailin, looked at the clown mask on Ailin's face, filled with confusion and fear, and said hoarsely, "Kill me." Clown Ailin's eyes turned cold at this. "Are you ordering me?" The word order seemed to sting deeply, reminding him of the days when he was controlled by Hydra and lived like a walking corpse. Deeply infuriated, Winter Soldier Bucky Barnes suddenly attacked Ailin like an angry lion. The high-tech metal arm, forged from an unknown alloy, burst forth with immense force, whistling and tearing through the air as it smashed towards the clown mask on Ailin's face. Seeing the Winter Soldier Bucky Barnes' sudden change of expression and his attack without a word, the smile beneath the mask faded, and he instantly raised the barrel of his M500 and fired a shot at Winter Soldier Bucky Barnes. A specially designed bullet, powerful enough to kill a rhino, struck Bucky Barnes's metal arm, causing no real damage beyond a shower of sparks. However, the bullet's immense kinetic energy caused Bucky Barnes's movements to pause for a moment. Taking advantage of this moment, Ailin delivered a whip kick, striking Bucky Barnes in the waist and sending him flying. Bucky rolled on the ground, quickly rising to his feet, then fiercely attacked Ailin the Clown with his fists, seemingly determined to fight Ailin to the death. Ailin the Clown, dodging Bucky's fists and occasionally striking back at Bucky, frowned slightly at the frenzied Bucky before him. He sensed that beneath his rage, Bucky, who appeared to want to kill him, was more likely seeking his own death. It seemed as if, struck by three of my despairing gaze, upon regaining consciousness, he no longer seemed to want to live. Otherwise, why would he leave all that heavy ammunition hanging on his body, instead of using it to engage in hand-to-hand combat with Ailin? Wait? Could those three, despairing gaze, have helped him break free from Hydra's mind control and regain his self? Ailin the Clown seemed to have a thought, a hint of disbelief in his eyes. If that was the case, Ailin the Clown could understand the death in his eyes. After all, he was supposed to be a hero of the Federation, but after awakening, he discovered that for decades, he had become a killing tool in the hands of his most hated enemy, committing countless unforgivable crimes. And all his former friends and family had perished in those long years. Left alone in this strange world, the mental shock he experienced at that moment might have made him wish he were dead, a desire to understand his own life. After all, at this moment, Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier, had no idea that his best friend, Steve Rogers, was still alive, just like him. Without any spiritual bonds, without the will to live, it's understandable that he'd wished for death. Perhaps that's why he'd fought Ailin the Clown without defense, seeking nothing more than death. Of course, if Ailin were careless, Bucky wouldn't mind killing the clown before finding a place to commit suicide. After realizing this, Ailin the Clown's mouth suddenly curved up beneath his mask. As if a thought had struck him, he suddenly became excited. Interesting, I felt something was off last night. As expected, I woke up with a cold and a fever. I almost finished writing this chapter by noon. I meant to post it, but I fell asleep and forgot. Sorry to have kept you all waiting. I'm going to get back to writing. Chapter 142 Exchanging Potions. Watching the Winter Soldier continue to attack him, Clown Ailin seemed to have lost interest in continuing. He unleashed two despairing stares, knocking Bucky unconscious once more. After knocking the Winter Soldier unconscious, Ailin returned to his room and began rummaging through the pile of loot in the corner. A moment later, he returned to the Winter Soldier's side with a bottle of small white pills. With a bottle of mineral water, he unceremoniously forced 7 or 8 of them into Bucky's mouth. These pills were among the spoils Ailin had amassed during his recent raids on Kingpin's dark strongholds. Don't get me wrong, these weren't the poison, anti-censorship, drugs Kingpin was selling, but rather a powerful sleeping pill rarely available on the market. 7 or 8 of these would have put not only the Winter Soldier but even a full-grown elephant to bed. After administering the powerful sleeping pills, he eliminated any chance of Bucky waking up quickly. Ailin pulled out a dagger and forcibly removed the other man's mechanical left arm. With this high-tech mechanical arm, Ailin was almost certain that Hydra had installed a tracking device inside it. If he didn't dismantle it, would it be a thorn in the side of Hydra? Of course, as a trophy. The clown Ailin didn't just discard the mechanical arm. Half an hour later, in an abandoned warehouse in Hell's Kitchen, Ailin and his clone, who had just separated, encountered each other again. You've arrived just in time. Let's see if this mechanical arm can be sacrificed. I'm doubtful that the signal jammers I built in this warehouse can block this thing for long. By the way, if this arm can be sacrificed, see if you can get another instigator potion. I can't wait to see this thing transform into a witch and meet Steve Rogers. Hey, my best friend transforms into a sexy witch. Do you think the virtuous Captain America can resist such temptation? Looking at the clone, whose eyes gleamed with a strong fire of gossip, Ailin felt that his clone had been deeply influenced by the clown mask left behind by that madman Jerome. Otherwise, why would he share that madman's interest in dragging virtuous and righteous people into darkness? Of course, Ailin would never admit that he, too, was interested in such things. He wouldn't even mention that upon receiving the message from his clone, he immediately and without delay retrieved the 2 potions, Sequence 9 and Sequence 7, belonging to the Witch sequence, for the assassin and witch, from the scale dimension, and hurriedly reunited with his clone in the warehouse. Accepting the blood-stained metal arm from his clone, Ailin entered the scale dimension without further ado. He summoned the Scales of Fate and placed the mechanical arm on one end. Watching the Scales of Fate gradually tilting before him, a flicker of surprise crossed Ailin's face. The good news was that while the mechanical arm wasn't some special supernatural item, it was nonetheless a powerful artifact of advanced technology. Furthermore, it was stained with the blood of those favored by fate. This instantly increased its value, meeting the Scales of Fate's sacrifice requirement. The bad news was that it wasn't enough. While the metal arm met the sacrifice requirement, its value wasn't particularly high. The value of this metal arm was far from enough to exchange for a Sequence 8 instigator potion from the Witch Path. Even if Ailin added all of his newly acquired 500 fate points, it still wouldn't be enough to exchange for a Sequence 8 instigator potion. A few seconds later, Ailin exited the scale dimension and returned to reality. After hearing this from his original self, Ailin, the clown, without hesitation, handed over the cursed scarecrow and Ironmonger's head from his collection. The cursed scarecrow, a transcendental item aside, Ironmonger's head seemed to possess some remarkable qualities as well. If the Winter Soldier's mechanical arm held value in exchange, then it stood to reason that Ironmonger's head, once bearing Obadiah's soul, wouldn't be as well. Even at the very least, Ailin figured it could still reduce the cost of the instigator potion. Having just emerged from the scale dimension, Ailin accepted the 2 items from his clone and, without further ado, entered the scale dimension. He placed the 2 items, along with the mechanical arm, onto one end of the scale. As the weights increased and decreased, the already heavily tilted end of the scale slowly descended. Simultaneously, the instigator potion condensing on the other end of the scale grew clearer and clearer, becoming more and more real. It actually worked. Watching the slowly descending side of the scale, Ailin's face flickered with a smile. It looked like these 2 items were worth quite a bit. However, Ailin hadn't anticipated that his words had been premature. Not long after, as the scale tilted lower and lower, gradually returning to equilibrium, it slowly came to a stop. Then, as if fixed to the scale, it remained motionless. As expected, I'm going to have to spend some money after all. With a wave of his hand, the destiny points in the attribute column transformed into glowing coins of destiny, which then fell onto the scale. After absorbing a full 298 of his own fate points, the Scales of Fate finally reached true balance. Looking at the instigator, potion condensing on the other end of the scales, Ailin decisively chose to exchange it. The next second, a tube of dark gray, instigator, potion materialized, and Ailin exchanged it. Holding the instigator potion in his hand, Ailin looked at the only 200 to fate points left in the attribute column, feeling like he had just received a salary that had quickly shriveled up before it could even warm up. He sighed deeply and exited the scale space. Returning to reality, Ailin handed the instigator potion, along with the assassin potion and the witch potion, the three-piece witch set that allowed him to progress from sequence 9 to sequence 7, to his clone. Upon receiving this three-piece witch set that allowed for perfect transformation, Ailin the clown's eyes flashed with excitement. Then he found the sequence 9, assassin potion and planned to pry open the Winter Soldier's mouth and force-feed it to him. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 143 The Idea of Forming a Force. Fortunately, Aillin's true self, standing nearby, stopped him in time. Otherwise, not only would the priceless assassin potion have been wasted, but they might even have had to deal with another distorted monster. Potions shouldn't be given to people unconscious. If they're not careful, they won't be able to withstand the information and contamination contained within, transforming into terrifying and powerful monsters. Don't rush. You can't give him potions while he's unconscious. Wait until he wakes up. Also, before giving him potions, we have to make some preparations. Unlike his clone, who had absorbed Aillin's dark side and was more interested in watching the fun, Aillin's true self went to such great lengths to give Bucky, the Winter Soldier, a potion from sequence 9 to sequence 7 of the Witch Path. Besides anticipating the sparks that would ignite Bucky's transformation into a witch, he also wanted to seize the opportunity to recruit a suitable subordinate. After Hydra's training, Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier, not only possesses profound combat proficiency but also mastery of various firearms. Coupled with the modifications Hydra has performed on him and the robotic arms he's been fitted with, his strength far surpasses that of an average human. Otherwise, he wouldn't have remained Hydra's ultimate killer weapon for decades. Once he ingests the sequence potion and truly becomes a Beyonder, Bucky Barnes's strength and heritage are bound to explode. With his decades of experience, he might even be able to instantly digest the sequence 9, assassin potion. After all, he's been a true assassin for decades. If that were the case, Ailin would undoubtedly be overjoyed to have such a powerful Beyonder, mastering a wide range of killing techniques. After all, for most powers in this world, having such a subordinate would be a blessing. Although Ailin had only recently arrived, he already felt the limitations imposed by his identity. If he really had to go it alone, just the daily ingredients needed to prepare the 1,000 years potion would require countless manpower and resources. Furthermore, as his cosmic brain meditation technique progresses, the amount of manpower and resources needed to collect the ingredients for those advanced nutritional potions will be even greater. Although Ailin is now a shareholder of the Osborn Corporation and can leverage Osborn Industries channels to acquire the necessary materials, he has been feeling a sense of unease regarding the recent boom in the Osborn Corporation. Ever since he exchanged a vial of the universal antidote for a 5% stake in the Osborn Corporation, Ailin hasn't seen Norman Osborn since. It's as if he's avoiding him. Every time he tries to visit him, he's always missed out due to various coincidences, ultimately never meeting him. This not only completely disrupts Ailin's original plan to hypnotize Norman Osborn, but also fills Ailin with a sense of unease. Coincidences aren't so common in this world. Norman Osborn's behavior almost made Ailin conclude that he had already shaken off his influence, and that it was only for unknown reasons, perhaps because he feared Ailin's mysterious nature, that he hadn't completely turned against him. Otherwise, there would be no need for him to avoid him. He was doing so precisely because he feared that Ailin would reinfect him if they met again. It was Norman Osborn's behavior that made Ailin even more eager to build his own power. Otherwise, if they fell out, and Norman Osborn cut off his supply of nutritional supplements, Ailin didn't know how long it would take to restore them. This was a very real possibility for Ailin. After all, if it were Ailin, he would never tolerate being dictated to by someone who was trying to hypnotize him. Of course, besides Osborn Industries, Ailin wasn't completely destitute. Taking advantage of the volatile stock market in Stark Industries, Ailin had essentially cleared out all of the shares, becoming the company's third largest shareholder. But Stark Industries was, after all, an arms company. Even if Tony Stark later transformed it into a new energy enterprise, it had nothing to do with biomedicine. It wasn't impossible for him to rely on such an arms company to supply him with raw materials for his nutritional supplements, but not only would the process be much slower, but the costs would also be exponentially higher. More importantly, Ailin doubted the quality of the herbs he sought. After all, a bunch of half-baked prodigies couldn't possibly distinguish good from bad. It was for these reasons that Ailin was eager to assemble his own team. And Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier who arrived at this moment, was undoubtedly a perfect fit. Not only did he possess immense strength, but more importantly, his weakened spirit, battered by countless Hydra attacks, was practically defenseless to Ailin. With his mastery of the mystic arts, he could easily plant a mental mark of submission in Bucky's heart without him even noticing. For Ailin, a practitioner of the cosmic brain meditation method and a master of psychic techniques, Hydra's hypnosis methods were far too crude. Not only were they fraught with danger, but they were also prone to being taken advantage of. Half an hour later, the comatose Winter Soldier Bucky Barnes opened his eyes again. The moment he opened his eyes, his gaze met a pair of captivating, star-like eyes. The next second, the countless stars within them seemed to swirl. Almost instantly, Bucky Barnes was captivated by their gaze. Unconsciously, he had imprinted his loyalty upon Bucky Barnes' mind. Only then did Ailin release his control over Bucky Barnes. After Ailin released the control, Bucky Barnes' eyes gradually regained clarity. He looked at the guy standing in front of him with a clown mask on his face, and said in a hoarse voice, my head is dizzy, I didn't even notice that the title was wrong. I'll contact the editor tomorrow to correct it. I can't change it myself in the background. Chapter 144, Counterattack is coming. Why don't you kill me? Unlike Hydra, Ailin had only imprinted loyalty deep within Bucky's psyche, but hadn't altered his memories. Much less erased Bucky's past memories like Hydra had. Ailin wanted a capable subordinate who could make his own decisions and handle most matters for him, not a mindless, murderous weapon that simply followed orders. In the warehouse, Ailin the clown looked at Bucky and chuckled softly, saying, Bucky Barnes, you're even more cowardly than I thought. Hydra did that to you, manipulating you like a puppet for decades. And the first thing you do when you wake up isn't revenge against Hydra, but a cowardly plea for death? This is truly eye-opening. Bucky clenched his right fist at the undisguised mockery in Ailin's words, and the veins on his forehead bulged. He growled hoarsely, do you think I don't want revenge? You have no idea what a behemoth Hydra is today. For decades, although Bucky had been brainwashed by Hydra and become a killing tool in their hands, he had also truly witnessed the true power of Hydra. Compared to such a behemoth, he was nothing more than an ant trying to stop a chariot. Even if he fought desperately, how much damage could he inflict on Hydra? Moreover, with Hydra's hidden power, they had plenty of means to crush anyone who opposed him, even if he had once been their ace assassin. Tisk. Before Winter Soldier Bucky Barnes could finish his words, the Joker, Ailin, sneered disdainfully. Hydra's strength makes you afraid to seek revenge? Decades ago, you dared to join Steve Rogers in bringing down Hydra, then at its peak. Now, you dare not even reveal your true name, hiding in the shadows, lacking the courage to seek revenge against Hydra, which is stirring up trouble in the dark. It seems I was wrong. I should never have helped you break free from Hydra's control, because you are not worthy of standing by my side and fighting Hydra with me for revenge. As he spoke, the Joker Ailin suddenly noticed that the multiple alarms he had set outside the warehouse had been suddenly triggered. His eyes suddenly turned cold, and he threw a loaded pistol in front of the Winter Soldier Bucky Barnes, saying coldly, I don't have time to comfort a loser. The people sent by Hydra for revenge are here. If you want to die, just shoot yourself. I won't stop you. Of course, if you still have a shred of courage, you can also pick up a gun and follow me and watch how I defeat the behemoth on your eyes. Clown Ailin ignored Bucky Barnes and walked alone toward the warehouse door. Hydra, Bucky muttered silently as he watched Clown Ailin retreat, his voice filled with deep hatred. After a long pause, Bucky grabbed the pistol in front of him, abruptly stood up, and followed where Clown Ailin had disappeared. Clown Ailin, his back to the Winter Soldier, heard footsteps behind him, and a faint smile crept onto his face hidden beneath his clown mask. In the former Kelpie gang's lair, the bald, bespectacled Sitwell, who looked somewhat refined, crouched over the corpse of Brock Crossbones Rumlow, his expression utterly grim. His gloomy expression practically dripped with water. To deal with the mysterious clown, Sitwell not only sent the experienced Brock Crossbones Rumlow with 20 elite Hydra agents, but also deployed the Winter Soldier, their ace assassin. He had thought he'd taken the Joker seriously, but he hadn't expected such a formidable force to be so easily defeated in a humble building like Hell's Kitchen. Not only had 20 elite agents, including Crossbones Brock Rumlow, perished, but the Winter Soldier, Hydra's costly weapon of destruction, had also vanished. So many people had perished at the hands of that garish clown. As the mastermind behind this plan, Sitwell knew he held an undeniable responsibility. If he could recover the losses and atone for this mistake, those within Hydra eager to step on him for power would not hesitate to seize this golden opportunity. There was only one way to quickly recover the losses and atone for this mistake: to kill the Joker, the culprit behind this blunder, and seize the Ironmonger's head from him. Thinking of this, a cold light flashed in Sitwell's eyes. He slowly stood up and wiped his right hand with a tissue after touching the body of Crossbones Brock Rumlow, then asked the assistant beside him in a cold voice, "Is everyone here? Our people have surrounded the warehouse where the clown is hiding, and the men sent by Kingpin have arrived outside the abandoned warehouse where the clown Ailin is hiding. At the same time, the New York City government has agreed to our application to use high-powered lethal weapons. As long as you give the order, we can use high-powered lethal weapons at any time to completely wipe out the clown and the abandoned warehouse where he's hiding from this world." Sitwell nodded and said in a cold tone, "Tell Kingpin that their people can take action. Yes, after Kingpin's men go in, let the snipers take position and snipe anyone who comes out of that warehouse from all directions without blind spots. Don't let even a fly out. Do you hear me?" "Yes." Sitwell's assistant hesitated for a moment, then said, "When Kingpin's men come out, do we have to kill them together?" Sitwell glanced at his assistant and said expressionlessly, "Have you forgotten the reason why we applied to the New York City government for the use of high-powered lethal weapons?" Sitwell's assistant shuddered at the sight of his superior's cold gaze. He suddenly remembered that their request for high-powered weapons of mass destruction from the New York City government was to eliminate the rampant and dangerous gangs in Hell's Kitchen. It turned out that his superior had never intended to spare Kingpin's men from the very beginning. Understanding Sitwell's intention, he quickly realized he had asked a foolish question and shouted yes, then bowed his head and retreated. Only after he had retreated did a flicker of sarcasm cross Sitwell's face. He had already paid such a heavy price, so how could he allow Kingpin to watch unscathed? Besides, if the operation was carried out well, eliminating dozens of vicious gang members could at least offset the consequences of his earlier missteps. Elsewhere, outside the abandoned warehouse where the clown Ailin was, one by one, bald men with chains around their necks hung up on the phone calls from Kingpin himself. Then, with a sly grin, he waved at his subordinates. The next second, 5 modified black vans opened with a whoosh, and heavy bazookas were carried out by tall, burly men. The bald man pointed to the warehouse door to one of the subordinates. The subordinate immediately understood and aimed the bazooka on his shoulder at the abandoned warehouse door and pulled the trigger. Boom! With a violent explosion, the door of the abandoned warehouse instantly shattered. A torrent of debris hurled into the warehouse like bullets. He, lowering the bazooka barrel from his shoulder, the burly man carrying it nodded in satisfaction, as if delighted with his precise strike. The bald man, with a chain around his neck, also wore a sinister grin. As expected of a Stark Industries rocket launcher, its power was far greater than those inferior Hammer Industries products. If the enemy wasn't so formidable, the boss probably wouldn't have been willing to bring out those Stark Industries rocket launchers. After all, Tony Stark had shut down Stark Industries' weapons manufacturing division, and rocket launchers of such high quality were no longer available. The stock they had was from the boss's scavenger hunt, so every last one they used was a waste. But if these could even take out the clown in the warehouse, then it would all be worth it. The bald man, with a chain around his neck, believed he knew that if he could help the boss eliminate the clown who had caused them so much damage, his boss would surely be generous with his reward. With hope for the future, the bald man, with a chain around his neck, waved his hand. The next second, whoosh, another Stark Industries bazooka fired at the blown-open door of the abandoned warehouse. Stark Industries Hellfire rockets instantly trailed long trails of flame, like a raging bull with its tail on fire, charging headlong into the abandoned warehouse. Boom! A dazzling burst of flames instantly erupted in the empty warehouse. And that wasn't the end. Soon, a third, fourth, and fifth rocket launcher blasted into the abandoned warehouse. The violent explosion shook the entire structure. Without waiting for the smoke from the explosions to clear, the bald man with a chain around his neck waved his hand, climbed into the Humvee next to him, and drove into the abandoned warehouse ahead. The boss had already rushed in, so of course, the bald man's minions wouldn't stay put. Soon, 40 or 50 gangsters, following behind 3 cars, burst into the warehouse. The show's about to begin. Watching the dozens of people rushing in recklessly, the clown, Ailin, pulled out a remote control from nowhere and pressed a red button. Boom! With a resounding bang, a car that had just entered the warehouse was suddenly sent flying by a violent explosion. Amidst screams, the gangsters in that car were engulfed in the soaring flames. "Be careful, there's a mine." Seeing this, people in the other 2 intact cars shouted and immediately got out without hesitation. If there were other mines buried in this warehouse, being in these cars would be far more dangerous than walking inside. But before they could get out, several more explosions rang out. Amidst this continuous blast, the remaining 2 cars barely survived for a few seconds before being engulfed in blazing flames. "Damn it!" The bald man, tumbling awkwardly from the Humvee, spat out a mouthful of blood foam and immediately roared at his men at the top of his lungs. "Fight back! You idiots, what are you all standing there for? Fight back! I'm going to kill that damn clown!" Bang, 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 bang. Following the bald man's barking, gangsters quickly stepped forward, their guns drawn, and they unleashed an indiscriminate barrage of fire into the smoke-filled warehouse. In an instant, the walls of the abandoned warehouse were riddled with bullet holes. A hornet's nest of bullets. Bang, bang, bang. As Kingpin's gangsters fired blindly into the smoke-filled warehouse, the clown, Ailin, hiding near the warehouse entrance, seized the opportunity to fire rapidly at the men. With a gun in each hand, Ailin the clown fired bullets like death warrants, each bullet taking a life. In a matter of moments, more than a dozen people fell to the clown's gun. "Be careful, that guy's behind us." "What? That damn clown's behind us." At 7 o'clock, everyone, kill him. Amid the acrid smoke, feeling his heart pounding, Ailin couldn't help but lick his lips and exhale. "We've been discovered." "Then, all of you die." His eyes suddenly darkened, and in an instant, he took in the positions of all the enemies. He watched as the gangsters spun quickly, their guns raised, firing at him. He spun abruptly, swung his hands in different directions, arc ballistics. In the next second, the bullets were fired. Bang, bang, 2 bullets traced a graceful arc in the air, each blasting the head of a gangster, then piercing the second with undiminished momentum. After the 2 bullets had exhausted their last bit of kinetic energy, they sank into the skull of the last enemy, never to escape. In an instant, a dozen or so menacing gangsters, now with their guns turned, collapsed to the ground, bound for hell to report to Mephisto. Meanwhile, Bucky, on the other side, fired a single shot, finishing off the bald man who was trying to escape. One thing to note, to increase subscriptions, all future chapters will be 4,000-word chapters. Daily updates will still be at 4,000 words, but we'll just merge 2 chapters into one. Don't worry. Chapter 145, The Beginning of the Assassin. Well done. Seeing that Bucky finally took action and decisively dispatched the bald figure who seemed to be the leader, the clown Aaron clapped his hands in satisfaction and said, "I'm glad you made the right choice. Okay, now that the small fry are dealt with, it's time to get to dinner." With that, Aaron glanced at the door blasted open by the bazooka, then turned a corner and led Bucky to a small compartment within the warehouse. He lifted the manhole cover inside and left the warehouse through the network of sewers. Aaron was never one to simply take a beating without fighting back. Almost as soon as he realized he was being targeted by Hydra, he began formulating a series of counterattacks. This abandoned warehouse was merely a decoy to attract attention. Of course, before leaving, the clown Aaron left a gift for the next group of people entering the warehouse. Elsewhere, before Sitwell could even reach the abandoned warehouse where Aaron was, he heard some shocking news. What? Upon hearing that, Kingpin's men, after storming the abandoned warehouse, hadn't even lasted a minute before vanishing without a sound, presumably having been killed. Sitwell's eyes slowly shifted from shock to a solemn expression. Although Sitwell also despised Kingpin's men, the fact that dozens of heavily armed gangsters, armed with numerous powerful firearms and even dangerous weapons like bazookas, couldn't even hold out for a minute against that clown was a bit unbelievable. "Captain, should we send our agents to attack that warehouse?" Sitwell pondered for a few seconds before nodding. Except for the snipers, send all our agents to attack that warehouse. Kingpin's men may be a bit useless, but they're still capable. I don't believe that clown could have taken out so many without paying a price. Yes, the agent next to Sitwell glanced at their commander's utterly dismal expression and quickly accepted the order. He then relayed Sitwell's order to the temporary commander on the battlefield. At the makeshift command center outside the abandoned warehouse, the temporary commander, having received Sitwell's orders, immediately ordered the attack. After issuing the order, Sitwell felt a sudden palpitation, a sense of inexplicable unease. But before he could comprehend the source of this palpitation, a 12.7mm armor-piercing, tungsten cord discarding sabot round pierced the bulletproof glass of the modified car with a thud. Passing through the rear windshield, within a thousandth of a second, they precisely struck Sitwell in the back of the head, the blood-stained bullet exploding between his brows. In that fraction of a second, the assistant, awaiting Sitwell's orders, had barely reacted when he saw their commander, shot on the head by a sniper, a flawless assassination. Hundreds of meters away, on the rooftop of a building, Ailin, who had sniped Sitwell, the Hydra commander, did not stop. Sniper bullet after sniper bullet ripped through, like a decree of death. He indiscriminately sniped the Hydra agents in the two cars behind Sitwell, taking one life after another. Meanwhile, after leaving the abandoned warehouse through the sewers, Clown Ailin took Bucky to a pre-prepared black sedan. With a roar, he stepped on the accelerator and sped away. In the car, Bucky looked at the buildings rapidly receding on both sides of the road and asked gravely, "Where are we going?" "Where? Revenge, of course. It's rude not to reciprocate. Those idiots at Hydra gave me a great gift, so let's give them one too." With a flicker of excitement in his eyes, Clown Ailin turned to look at Bucky in the back seat and said, "By the way, as Hydra's ace, you should know where Hydra's headquarters is in New York." There was a moment of silence. Bucky nodded emphatically. "Of course, excellent." Clown Ailin snapped his fingers gleefully, then pulled a tube of the strangely shimmering assassin potion from his pocket and tossed it at Bucky. Picking up the assassin potion that Clown Ailin had casually tossed at him, Bucky asked gravely, "What is this?" "The assassin potion in your hand is a special potion that allows you to touch the supernatural and possess extraordinary powers. After drinking it, your strength will be comprehensively enhanced." Was it something like the super soldier serum that Steve drank? After hearing Clown Ailin's explanation, Bucky looked at the assassin potion in his hand with a sense of daze. No wonder the Joker possessed such formidable strength. It turned out he possessed something like it. In fact, after being controlled by Hydra, Bucky, once used as a test subject, had also been injected with various potions by Hydra. While those potions weren't as powerful as the famous super soldier serum, they had also significantly enhanced Bucky's physical fitness. In the rearview mirror, as if reading Bucky's gaze, the clown, Ailin, scoffed, "Don't treat the assassin potion as some garbage like super soldier serum. It's a potion that can truly allow you to reach the transcendental, even possessing the potential to achieve godhood. It possesses a myriad of incredible abilities. For example, if you take the assassin potion's subsequent advanced potion twice more, it will genetically transform you, completely regenerating you. At that point, even growing your left hand back wouldn't be impossible. A complete transformation, a complete rebirth," Bucky muttered, his gaze gradually shifting as he gazed at the assassin potion in his hand. Because of his psychic imprint, Bucky didn't doubt Ailin's words. However, he wasn't interested in Ailin's talk of transcendental abilities or even godhood. Instead, it was the words about a complete transformation and a complete rebirth that truly struck a chord with Bucky. Freed from Hydra's mental control and fully awakened, Bucky felt a deep resentment for the heinous crimes he committed while under Hydra's control. He even began to loathe his former self. So, if this supposed assassin potion could truly transform him and give him a new life, then it seemed like a good option. After all, he had no family left in this world. Forgetting the past, changing his appearance, and starting over might be a good thing. Of course, if his left hand could grow back along with his new life, that would be even better. No one wants to be disabled if they can. Bucky was no exception. With this thought in mind, Bucky took the stimulation potion with his right hand, brought it to his mouth, bit off the cork, and then tilted his head back to pour the assassin potion into his mouth. As he did so, the assassin potion in the test tube flowed into Bucky's mouth without a drop left. The moment he swallowed the assassin potion, Bucky felt as if he had swallowed a ball of electricity, and his entire body suddenly shook violently. At the same time, the assassin potion that Bucky had swallowed rapidly decomposed into dark particles, incorporating into every one of Bucky's cells and transforming his body at the most microscopic level. Looking at Bucky, his eyes widening as he slumped in the backseat, the clown, Ailin, who was driving, curled his lips into a wicked smile. "I didn't force you to drink this, assassin, and I've made it clear. It was you who wanted to transform yourself and be reborn. Don't blame me when you become a witch." With a touch of perverse joy in his heart, Ailin drove, humming a cheerful tune, towards the Hydra headquarters in New York that Bucky had just told him about. Meanwhile, Ailin, having left the building where he had sniped Sitwell and moved to another, even buying himself a cup of coffee, watched the Hydra agents cautiously enter the abandoned warehouse 1,000 meters away. He slowly raised his coffee and said, "Goodbye." Almost as soon as Ailin finished speaking, a violent explosion erupted in the abandoned warehouse 1,000 meters away. Boom! With a resounding blast, the terrifying shockwave razed the old, abandoned warehouse to the ground. Raging flames and billowing smoke soared into the sky. Even from 1,000 meters away, the powerful shockwave made Ailin's windbreaker rustle. "This is quite powerful." After sighing at the power of the Raffle 1T9 explosives, Ailin reached out and grabbed his hat, which had been blown by the wind, and pressed it against his head, turning to leave. The violent explosion resounded through the sky, and it was likely heard by half of New York. The clown, Ailin, and his companions, who had already driven away, were no exception. Bucky, lying in the back seat of the car, unconscious from the assassin potion, was jolted awake by the deafening sound. Seeing Bucky regain consciousness, the clown, Ailin, asked, "How do you feel?" Sitting in the back seat, Bucky, feeling the sudden surge of seemingly innate special abilities within him, couldn't help but clench his right hand. "This feels amazing." The initial sequence of the witch path, assassin, not only solidified Bucky's eagle vision and dark vision, but also granted him the ability to transform his body in a short period of time, becoming as light and agile as a feather. Furthermore, every assassin possesses profound control over their body, allowing them to mobilize all their strength in a short period of time, unleashing their full power in a single strike to deliver a fatal blow. Furthermore, the skills of lurking in the shadows are ingrained into Bucky's bones, like innate instinct. These abilities, combined with Bucky's inherent combat prowess and mastery of various firearms, almost instantly amplified Bucky's danger level to another level. At that moment, Bucky's gaze fell on his left arm, and he suddenly froze. The bloody, mangled left arm, where Ailin had roughly disassembled it, had healed in some unknown way, even sprouting a patch of tender, pink flesh. Though only half a finger's length, this pink patch made Bucky's shortened left shoulder appear more complete. Though a subtle change, it was a heartening relief for Bucky, for he saw hope that his left arm would grow back. Just as Bucky was feeling incredibly excited, Ailin, observing Bucky through the rearview mirror, noticed something more. Besides the tender new flesh on Bucky's left arm, after consuming the assassin potion, Bucky's body had become slimmer. This wasn't to say he'd lost weight, but rather that the potion had created a more balanced muscle curve, better suited for explosive power. Even Bucky's originally broad frame seemed to have shrunk. That wasn't a big deal. After all, the assassin potion already possessed incredible abilities, so tweaking Bucky's body wasn't surprising, just like the subtle changes he'd experienced after taking the Joker potion. But I don't know if it was Ailin's imagination, or if he'd known in advance that the witch path would undergo a dramatic transformation at sequence 7. Ailin felt that Bucky's features had become a bit more delicate after taking the assassin potion. Could it be that the changes in the witch path had already begun to show subtle signs at sequence 9? Hiss. Shaking his head to dismiss the feeling, the clown, Ailin, said to Bucky, "It's good to feel great. We're still some distance from the Hydra headquarters, and I hope you can quickly adapt to the changes in your body. You can try acting as an assassin to digest the potion's power. The higher your level of acting, the faster you'll digest the assassin potion, and the more thorough your mastery of its power will become. This method is called acting. If one day you completely digest the assassin potion, you'll truly master its full power and be able to try the next level of potion in advance." Bucky's body shuddered slightly at this, and he shifted his hips slightly, subconsciously settling into the shadows of the car's backseat. After a few seconds, He hesitated, saying, "Just now, I thought I heard a cracking sound, and then I had a feeling that I'd completely digested the potion. Was it just an illusion?" Watching his body subconsciously blend into the darkness, he emanated a unique aura that made people subconsciously ignore him. A row of question marks flashed across Clown Ailin's head. Chapter 146 The Release Ghost. Completely digested the assassin's potion already? How long had it been since Bucky took it? 10 minutes? He completely consumed it in such a short time. Was he a natural-born assassin? Wait. While Bucky wasn't a natural-born assassin, for decades, Bucky the Winter Soldier had been performing assassin duties under Hydra's orders. He didn't even need to act, he was a true assassin. His decades of experience as an assassin had practically preconditioned him to consume the assassin's potion. So, how could Bucky's digestion speed not be swift? Thinking of this, Ailin seemed to understand why Bucky was digesting the assassin's potion so quickly. Watching Bucky's seemingly divinely assisted digestion, and recalling how he had tried every possible means, even resorting to the guise of a wandering fortune teller, to speed up the potion's digestion, Ailin the clown couldn't help but shake his head. Fortunately, his clown-like digestion was pretty quick, otherwise he'd be choked to death. He didn't know if it was a deliberate attempt at deception, or perhaps a way to further conceal his true identity. Hydra's New York headquarters wasn't actually located in New York itself, but in New Jersey, just across the river. As the sun's afterglow bathed the George Washington Bridge in a golden hue, Ailin, who had driven all the way from New York, finally arrived at the Hydra headquarters. It was a fortress that looked incredibly old. Green vines and ferns could be seen creeping along its towering walls, and the exposed areas were even more stained with mottled marks. The air was filled with the air of history. Looking at the large castle before him, Ailin sighed, "Wow, another castle. Hydra sure has a lot of money." While this wasn't New York, where every inch of land was worth a fortune, it was clear that this large, historic castle wasn't cheap. The fact that Hydra could transform a castle like this into a base proved to be quite wealthy. Strange, why do so many people in this world like to convert castles like this into their headquarters? Clown Ailin pondered, gazing at the castle before him. The Assassin Brotherhood, a millennia-old organization, did this. Baron Strucker, a Hydra branch, did this. Even Alexander, a Hydra branch rooted with an SHIELD, built a castle in New Jersey, just across the river from New York. Before Ailin could even approach, several men emerged from the castle's gates and stopped their car. "Stop. This is private property. No trespassing." At the same time, the Joker's keen intuition enabled Ailin to sense that at least 3 sniper rifles were trained on their vehicle from various locations throughout the castle. Before Ailin could say anything, Bucky, in the backseat, rolled down the window and cast a cold glance at the Hydra trainees blocking the way. A lowly task like guarding the gate wouldn't be handled by Hydra's elite. Bucky's icy gaze sent a chill through the inexperienced Hydra trainees, who shuddered subconsciously. But even as a wave of fear welled up in their hearts, the Hydra trainees guarding the castle's gates recognized the figure who had infuriated them. As Hydra's ace, the invincible Winter Soldier, they knew him, especially since he had just left the base that morning. Trainees, though trainees, were still discerning. Therefore, upon spotting Bucky, the Winter Soldier, in the backseat, they quickly lowered their weapons. One of the more astute young men, observing Bucky's bare left arm and the bloodied wound he was covering with his hand, immediately seized the opportunity to ask, "Sir, do you need me to call a doctor?" Before the other could finish, Bucky cast another cold glance. Realizing he might have said something wrong, the young man immediately shut up, swallowing back his unspoken words. Pulling a special card bearing the Hydra logo from his jacket pocket, Bucky said coldly, "Open the door." "Yes, sir." He quickly scanned Bucky's card on a black identification machine, and with a beep, the castle's locked gate slowly opened. As the gate swung open, Ailin spotted the sniper rifle pointed at him from within the castle and retracted it. Seeing the gate open, Bucky took his card back from the young man and rolled up the car window again. Seeing this, the clown, Ailin, smiled slightly as he slowly drove the black sedan into the castle. Logically, as Hydra's headquarters in New York, the security here should be exceptionally strict. But strangely, no one questioned Ailin's identity from beginning to end. Not even the Hydra members guarding the gates glanced at him. Ailin, observing this from the driver's seat, smiled and said, "This hypnosis is surprisingly effective." After entering the castle, Bucky surveyed his surroundings and whispered, "Next, we must capture the control center of this base before they react. Then, through it, we can trigger the base's self-destruct sequence and completely destroy it. Otherwise, once word of my return gets out, Hydra's higher-ups will surely react quickly. By then, it won't be so easy for us to destroy this place again." Inside the car's driver's seat, Ailin, his pupils darkening once more, gazed at a certain spot within the castle and shook his head. It seems there's no need to go to all that trouble. The moment he stepped into the castle, he felt as if he had broken through a barrier, stepping into the borderland between reality and fantasy. Sensing something amiss, Ailin activated his clairvoyance. The moment his clairvoyance was activated, Ailin the clown's eyes seemed to pierce through the illusion, beholding a grotesque world. The once ordinary castle suddenly became eerie and terrifying in Ailin's sight. At the same time, a chilling wind, almost shrill, blew from the depths of the castle, as if rejecting any uninvited visitors. He pulled a crystal eye from his jacket pocket and placed it on his right eye. With the crystal eye on, the grotesque world before Ailin's eyes seemed to clear up a little. After taking another look around the castle, Ailin parked the car casually in sight and got out. Turning to Bucky, he said, "Follow me." Following the stone-paved path, Ailin, guided by what he had seen, quickly led Bucky into the castle's backyard. Compared to the obviously renovated front yard and the castle itself, the backyard retained a greater sense of history. Fallen pillars and piled stones were everywhere. Though simply repaired, these features had become unique landscapes, yet a hint of time remained. Among these unique sights imbued with the air of time, a towering stone sculpture of a knight clad in full armor, wielding a broadsword too powerful for a human to wield, stood out prominently in the backyard. The golden glow of the setting sun cast a golden veil over the slightly darkened knight statue. Unseen by ordinary eyes, strands of golden light were continuously absorbed by the knight statue, converging towards the greatsword in its hand. This subtle change imbued the knight statue with a hint of holiness. However, this sacred aura, like a candle in the wind, flickered constantly, seemingly poised to dissipate at any moment. "Interesting seal, what a pity." Just as the clown Ailin finished his words, a disembodied yet piercing roar suddenly filled Ailin's ears. Simultaneously, a thick black mist poured out from the base of the stone knight, almost completely enveloping the towering figure. The chilling black mist corroded the statue above. If it weren't for the last glimmer of holiness lingering on the greatsword wielded by the statue, constantly eroding the surrounding black mist, the statue would have long since been completely eroded. Looking down at the statue, the chilling air was so thick, almost tangible, that Ailin knew without a second thought what powerful spirit was sealed beneath the towering stone knight. As Ailin's gaze fell upon the statue, the black mist enveloping the knight seemed to sense something as well. Two fiery red lights pierced the black fog, gazing coldly at Ailin and Bucky. Seeing that Ailin seemed to be able to see them, the two red lights within the fog rippled slightly. Then, a unique spiritual wave suddenly entered their minds. "You can see me, unseal me, and I will grant you eternal life." The will within the black fog seemed too weak, as if it hadn't communicated in a long time. Even its mental communication was somewhat halting. Of course, its tone soon returned to normal with unexpected speed. Hearing this sudden voice in his mind, Bucky, who was following behind Ailin, narrowed his eyes and stared at the knight statue before him with a look of disbelief. This is, with his high spiritual power and the sharp vision of the assassin, even without psychic sight, Bucky could vaguely perceive the difference in the knight statue before him. He just couldn't see it as clearly as Ailin could. "Don't be so surprised. It's just a sealed vengeful spirit. You can see these guys by injecting spiritual power into your own eyes, but I have to say, Hydra really knows how to choose a location. With this vengeful spirit here, even without our intervention, it won't be long before this spirit, having broken free from its seal, turns this castle into true no man's land. But it seems to save us some effort." With that, Bucky the clown pulled out his M500 revolver and fired a single shot. Bang! The silver-white bullet accurately struck the center of the stone greatsword with a dull thud. This brutal bombardment seemed to be the straw that broke the camel's back. The stone greatsword, already corroded by the black fog, could no longer withstand the fierce blow and was directly shattered in two by the M500. As the greatsword shattered, the last trace of its sacred aura quickly escaped from the gap and dissipated. Taking advantage of this moment, Ailin pulled Bucky back quickly. After a few short leaps and bounds, they reappeared at the castle's gate. Almost as soon as Ailin and Bucky rushed out of the castle, A vast expanse of black fog suddenly filled the backyard. The thick black fog transformed into a pitch-black curtain, like an inverted bowl, tightly enveloping the massive castle. Buggy, who had just escaped the castle, watched the sudden black curtain descend behind him. He turned in surprise and asked, "What's going on?" "A ghost domain. Powerful ghosts can use their abilities to interfere with reality and illusion, temporarily sealing off a certain area. However, while those who enter the ghost domain are unable to leave, the ghost itself is also subject to the same restrictions, unable to escape." Upon hearing this, Buggy asked in a deep voice, "Is there any way to break this ghost domain?" "Of course there is. The power of the ghost domain is unstable. If we have enough firepower to raise this place to the ground, we can also break this strangeness. In that case, the ghosts maintaining this ghost domain will also be retaliated and may even perish." At the same time, the evil spirits within the castle completely broke free from their seal. An endless black fog rose, completely enveloping the castle and seeping into every corner. A bright red figure emerged from the fog. The next second, the figure appeared 100 meters away. Then, strands of black hair shot out from her body, piercing the flesh of a Hydra trainee. In less than 3 seconds, the trainee was sucked dry. Meanwhile, the Crimson Ghost seemed to solidify a little. "Not enough, not enough. I need more blood." After consuming a Hydra member, the Crimson Body, far from being satisfied, seemed to grow even more violent. With a shrill roar, it launched an attack on every living being in the castle. Chapter 147: The Invading Mage. As the newly liberated evil spirit rampaged through the castle, transformed into a ghostly realm, the clown, Ailin, and Buggy eliminated the lucky Hydra members and hidden sentries around the castle who had escaped the ghostly realm. With Buggy, a former Hydra ace assassin, acting as a mole, and Ailin's clairvoyance, which allowed him to directly detect the auras of spirits and pinpoint their location, the two of them eliminated the surviving Hydra members and hidden sentries with unwavering accuracy. Furthermore, with their combined strength, the remaining Hydra members were no match, unable to inflict even the slightest harm. In a matter of moments, they were completely wiped out. After confirming through divination that no Hydra members remained outside the ghostly castle, Ailin, the clown, was about to leave with Buggy when he suddenly noticed a spinning circle appear in the void not far away, emitting a shower of sparks. Dimensional Gate. Quickly recognizing the signature spell of the mages of this world's Kamartaj, Clown Ailin quickly led Buggy to a nearby, recently cleared bunker before the circle expanded. Just as Ailin and the others had barely managed to hide in the bunker, the circular dimensional gate expanded to human size. Simultaneously, on the other side of the circle, a slightly dilapidated ruin, as if it had been baptized by war, appeared. Within this ruin, 2 figures in mage robes stepped out of the dimensional gate. As soon as they emerged, one of the slightly overweight mages cursed at the ancient castle shrouded in a ghostly realm. "Damn it! A ghost realm has actually formed. This is causing trouble. Once a ghost realm forms, it will communicate with a hell dimension, spontaneously drawing power from the earth dimension to sustain itself. The longer the ghost realm and hell dimension remain connected, the deeper the connection will become. Eventually, the demon lords in hell will even be able to use this connection to directly open a passage between hell and earth, invading the earth in reverse. It seems we must act quickly and destroy this ghost realm. Otherwise, if the higher level demons in hell discover this anchor point and project their power, it will be difficult for us to destroy this ghost realm. I don't want to face those demons from hell at this moment." Seeing this, the slightly overweight Mage King, the Mage Mordo, who exuded a cold aura, drew the scepter of the living tribunal from his back and said simply, "Don't worry, King. It's just a ghost. We can deal with it quickly." Compared to the beings the Supreme Venerable faced, this evil spirit and this ghostly realm are nothing. Let's go. After we've dealt with the evil spirit inside and destroyed this ghostly realm, we must hurry back to the New York Sanctuary and stabilize the magic circle there. The barrier set up by the New York Sanctuary has been destroyed, and Earth's protective barrier is broken. At this critical juncture, we cannot allow the barrier set up by the Supreme Venerable to fail. Until the Supreme Venerable returns, we must protect Earth from the invasion of those evil beings who covet Earth. As he spoke, Mordo, drawing the scepter of the living tribunal, his eyes cold, opened another dimensional portal before him. This dimensional portal directly crossed the ghostly barrier and led him to the ancient castle within the ghostly realm. Seeing Master Mordo entering the dimensional portal with his weapon, Master Wang drew his weapon from his back and followed him into the ghostly castle that connected reality and fantasy. After Master Mordo and Master Wang vanished into the sparking dimensional portal, the portal Mordo had opened in mid-air also rapidly shrank and vanished into the air. Inside the bunker, the clown, holding his breath and making absolutely no sound, frowned slightly as he watched the two mages, Mordo and Wang, vanish through the dimensional portal. In that brief moment, through his conversation with Master Mordo and Master Wang, Master Ailin had gleaned a wealth of crucial information. The vast magical formation protecting Earth, formed by the interconnected three sanctuaries, had somehow failed. Even the mages of the Sorcerer Supreme's lineage relied on the temporary magical barrier cast by the Ancient One to temporarily stabilize the New York Sanctuary's protection. And at this crucial moment, the Sorcerer Supreme, the Ancient One, seemed to have departed Earth to deal with some enemy, leaving only the mages of the Sorcerer Supreme's lineage to protect Earth. Thinking of this, Ailin began to understand why, despite the recent surge of paranormal events clearly linked to corruption and demons in New York, no one had stepped in to address them. Given the Supreme Sorcerer's current state, they might not have the time or energy to deal with such trivial matters. Wait? Does this also mean that even if he makes a big move, no one will care? For some reason, after learning that the Supreme Sorcerer's lineage was temporarily unavailable, a crazy idea suddenly occurred to the clown, Ailin. Just as Ailin was lost in thought, Bucky, who had perfectly blended into the shadows of the bunker, suddenly asked, "Who are those two guys? And what's with that circle that looks like a ring of fire?" Ailin glanced back at Bucky behind him and said calmly, "They are the mages of Camartage. As for that ring of fire, it's a spell that can teleport them to any corner of the world, a spell that can teleport them to any corner of the world." A subtle glint of shock crossed Buggy's eyes as he heard Ailin's explanation. He muttered, "Teleporting to every corner of the world, this spell's power is simply too incredible, Tisk, that's just the beginning. This world is filled with incredible things." After a sneer, Ailin the clown chuckled, "Undead evil spirits, ancient elves, towering frost giants, strange stone giants, demons that spread fear, ancient gods from mythology, even dimensional masters who roam beyond the world and seek to devour Earth, all of these myths and legends, you, who have already embarked on the transcendental journey, will one day witness them, even confront them firsthand." It wasn't clear if Ailin the clown's words were so powerful, or if he was secretly using his spiritual power to constantly stir Buggy's emotions. Anyway, Buggy's somewhat cold assassin heart was warmed by Ailin's words. Seeing this, Ailin the clown's lips curled slightly with a smile. The world is about to undergo a major transformation. Everything I've described will manifest in this world in the near future. When that happens, this world will face immense challenges. If you wish to confront those beings, mere assassins alone are not enough. Strive to become stronger, Buggy. Buggy was silent for a long moment, then nodded imperceptibly. It's unclear whether Master Mordo and his companions were in a hurry, or whether the Camartage lineage possessed the means to subdue evil spirits. In short, shortly after Mordo and the king entered the castle's haunted domain, a thick, silky black aura began to surge violently above it. A short while later, accompanied by a soul-piercing wailing, the darkness that enveloped the castle in this haunted domain slowly dissipated. And the castle, drawn between reality and illusion, slowly began to return to reality. Once the thick black aura completely dissipated, this castle, steeped in history, fully returned to reality, free of any trace of illusion. But then, the castle had completely lost its last shred of life, filled with gloom and decay. Even the vines and plants that crawled through it withered and rotted. After the black mist completely dissipated, the clown, Ailin, hiding in the dark fortress, used his clairvoyance to scan the castle, now back to reality, but could detect no trace of the two mages, Mordo and Wang, who had previously entered the ghostly castle. Have they left? It seems the problem at the New York Sanctuary is even more serious than I imagined, Ailin mused after seeing Mordo and Wang leave without waiting for the ghostly space to stabilize. Any special spell carries a certain risk when teleporting through unstable space, and the dimensional gate must be no exception. That's not necessarily true. Ailin's thought was only halfway through when he reconsidered it. After all, his knowledge of the Supreme Mage lineage was too limited, and making a judgment based on his own subjective judgment seemed a bit arbitrary. What if the dimensional gate was such a perverted spell? After waiting a while longer, making sure that Mordo and Wang wouldn't appear again, Clown Ailin and Buggy returned to the castle. Walking on the earth that reeked of decay, They discovered that the castle had suffered considerable damage during its transformation into a ghostly realm. In just a few moments, the castle had decayed as if decades had passed. Even the masonry of the outer walls had crumbled. Numerous areas within the castle had collapsed, seemingly unnatural, but rather the result of intense fighting. Recalling the violent black mists swirling above the castle, Clown Ailin chuckled. It seems those Camartage wizards won't have as easy a time destroying that evil spirit as they thought. With a sneer, Clown Ailin and Buggy began cleaning up the battlefield. While clearing away any traces of their presence, they also collected items they could use from the base. Unfortunately, the encroaching ghost realm had wreaked unimaginable havoc on the base. All the electronic equipment within the castle was rendered useless. Even many of the guns and ammunition had suffered inexplicable damage. After a long while of collecting their belongings, Clown Ailin and Bucky each carried a backpack and disappeared outside the castle. Before leaving, Clown Ailin glanced at the castle, a look of inexplicable thought in his eyes. What a shame. If those two mages hadn't appeared, I could have cleared this ghost realm and gained a few fate points. Meanwhile, at a private golf course, Alexander Pierce, the former director of SHIELD and leader of Hydra, a group rooted in SHIELD, was entertained by a dozen beautiful women, chatting and laughing with a federal senator, comparing their golf skills. Shortly thereafter, during halftime, a secretary beside Pierce, dressed in a business suit and with long, straight legs, leaned over and whispered something in his ear. As the secretary spoke, Pierce's eyes darkened almost visibly. However, he quickly regained his graceful and composed demeanor. Then he complained to Congressman Stern beside him with a look of distress. Really, it seems that I am destined to be a hard-working person. I finally want to take a break, but I always encounter unexpected situations. I am really busy all the time. Ha ha ha. Minister Pierce is the mainstay of the World Security Council. Those who are capable should do more work. Without you, your subordinates probably don't know how to carry out their work properly and deal with those emergencies. You go and do your work first. I won't accompany you. It's a rare break. I still want to play ball here for a while and relax. Looking at the 7 or 8 beauties gathered around Congressman Stern, Pierce smiled and said, Ha ha ha, I think you are the real capable person who should work harder. As he said that, Pierce waved his hand, and asked the 7 or 8 beauties gathered around him to move closer to Congressman Stern, then waved with his back to Congressman Stern. Stern, thank you for your hard work this time. I won't accompany you for now. As he said that, Pierce smiled and said hello. Then he and his secretary got into a specially made business car and left the private golf course. Almost at the moment when the female secretary got in and closed the car door, Pierce's face darkened at a speed visible to the naked eye. What's going on? Is today a day of suffering? Frank Grillo, Crossbones, is dead, Sitwell is dead, and even the Winter Soldier is missing. No one knows whether he's alive or dead. Is there any news in the world worse than this? At this moment, the female secretary sitting opposite Pierce's phone rang. She picked up the phone calmly, glanced at it, and then said with a cold face, Sorry, Minister Pierce, things may be worse than you think. The latest news just received. Chapter 148 The Furious Fury. The latest news we just received is that a branch in New York seems to have been attacked by an unknown chemical weapon, and all the members who stayed behind in the base were killed. Their bodies had turned into mummies and dry bones when they were found, and it had only been a few hours since the accident. What's more serious is that the base of the New York branch has also been contaminated by an unknown source. Not only have all the electronic equipment been scrapped, but even the land within the base has been corroded and turned into a swamp, filled with the smell of decay. The only good news is that that type of biological weapon seems to have a limited range and has not spread. The secret sentries we posted outside the base were not hit by that chemical weapon. Of course, they were also cleansed by an unknown enemy. So far, we haven't found any survivors. Bang! The long-legged female secretary hadn't finished her words when Pierce, who had just taken a bottle of iced whiskey from the refrigerator in the car and poured himself a glass, intending to drink a sip to calm his nerves, smashed the glass in his hand with a bang. The sexy, long-legged secretary let the flying glass shards rip her stockings, leaving a bloody mark on her long, round, straight legs, remaining calm. She looked at the enraged Pierce, leaned over, and retrieved another wine glass. Using tweezers, she plucked a few ice cubes from the small refrigerator and placed them in the glass. Then, she took another bottle of Pierce's favorite wine, gently swirled it, and finally poured it into the glass. Minister, your drink. Pierce, initially furious, slowly calmed down at the secretary's smooth, pleasing movements. His composure returned. He took the slightly cooled wine glass from the secretary's hand, took a sip, and let the cool, mellow liquor glide over his tongue, cascading into his heart. The icy sensation quickly restored his composure. Having been able to reinvigorate Hydra, a group that should have been annihilated by SHIELD, right under the enemy's noses, Pierce's ability and cunning were unquestionable. In that moment, he was simply enraged by the string of bad news. After that rage subsided, Pierce quickly regained his composure and returned to a state of extreme rationality. After a long time, Pierce spoke again. I remember that Frank Grillo, Crossbones, and the Winter Soldier should have gone to deal with the clown in Hell's Kitchen today, and find a way to find and take back the missing Ironmonger head. Yes, Minister, so, the two of them failed in their mission and were killed by the clown in Hell's Kitchen. Yes, Minister. Mr. Sitwell found the bodies of Frank Grillo and the team members he led in the clown's residence not long ago. Then when he was going to deal with the escaped clown, he was sniped on the way, and the final facts prove that the warehouse that Mr. Sitwell wanted to rush to was another trap. That trap destroyed at least 3 of our elite teams. Pierce narrowed his eyes and asked, so Sitwell's death was also done by that clown? The female secretary shook her head. No, after analysis, the people in the information department believe that the person who sniped Mr. Sitwell should be someone else, not the clown himself, but more likely his companions. Why? While the warehouse Mr. Sitwell was heading for was a trap, the clown was indeed inside before Sitwell arrived, engaging in a fierce clash with Kingpin's men and killing dozens of them. If Sitwell hadn't confirmed the clown's presence in the warehouse, he wouldn't have headed there directly, otherwise he would have been ambushed. Afterwards, the people in the information department analyzed that given the distance between the warehouse and the sniper attack on Sitwell, it's impossible for the clown to arrive so quickly. So the clown has companions. After a cold laugh, Pierce paused, frowning slightly. If the clown has companions, then the incident at the New York branch could also be their doing, a form of revenge. The female secretary frowned at this. That's not ruled out. But how did they accurately locate our New York branch in such a short time and launch such a powerful attack in such a short time? During this period, Hydra was still dormant. Although they secretly expanded their influence across the globe, controlling countless unknown connections and forces, becoming a veritable behemoth, their public information remained top secret. Their confidentiality was meticulous. Otherwise, given Nick Fury's paranoid nature, how could they, a group lurking within SHIELD for decades, remain undetected? Who knows? Interrogation, hypnosis, even electronic tracking. There are so many ways to find the New York branch. After all, most of the troops we sent to round up the Joker this morning were transferred from there, but that doesn't matter anymore. Now that we know who our opponent is, let's do whatever it takes to destroy him and everything connected to him. With a soft chuckle, Pierce, his eyes gleaming with an endless cold light, gulped down the icy wine in his hand. But, the secretary hesitated, then said, what if we've found the wrong person? Then let's keep looking. It's just a matter of finding him sooner or later. Even if the Joker wasn't responsible for the New York branch's incident, he's still responsible for the deaths of Frank Grillo and Sitwell. He killed so many of us, he must die. I understand what you mean. At this moment, Pierce added, by the way, remember to have someone report this to Director Fury. Frank Grillo and Sitwell sacrificed their lives for Hydra. We can't let their families down. They must receive all the compensation they deserve. Remember to have Director Fury sign the compensation as soon as possible. After all, Frank Grillo and Sitwell are official SHIELD agents. Hearing this, the secretary was slightly startled, and then her expressionless face twitched slightly. Minister Pierce was right. Frank Grillo and Sitwell were, in their official capacity, SHIELD agents. Even the individuals they brought with them bore the guise of SHIELD's identity. Even this operation was registered with SHIELD. Now that they had been killed in the line of duty, SHIELD naturally had to pay a generous death benefit. The death benefits for dozens of elite agents were astronomical. Thinking of the usually stingy director Nick Fury paying out exorbitant compensation for fallen Hydra members, a smile crossed her delicate face. Yes, Mr. Minister. It wasn't long before Nick Fury, clad in a trench coat, had rushed back to the Federation from Europe. He had just disembarked from the plane, before even returning to SHIELD's Triskelion building, when he heard devastating news that infuriated him. "Fuck," he said, looking at the level 3 agent before him. Trembling with fear at his own anger, Nick Fury asked gravely, "Why did the New York branch suffer so many casualties?" The level 3 agent in charge of the briefing said, "Agent Frank's team perished in the line of duty, and Agent Sitwell and his team were ambushed and trapped while on their way to support them." So, before Nick Fury's face darkened, the agent in charge of the briefing quickly said, "Director, you personally approve the mission Agent Frank and his team are carrying out." Nick Fury's breath hitched at that. In fact, the workaholic Nick Fury had actually remotely approved dozens of missions from the Federation during his meetings in Europe, even personally issuing several. If he remembered correctly, he had personally approved the mission for Agent Frank and his team to go to Hell's Kitchen and attempt to retrieve Ironmonger's head from the Joker. After all, having successfully seized Ironmonger's body, SHIELD had essentially recreated the invincible Ironmonger model. All that was missing was a crucial piece of technology to recreate the war machine that had once appeared on the streets of New York City. In that situation, upon discovering the mysterious clown who had taken Ironmonger's head had appeared in Hell's Kitchen, Nick Fury immediately approved the scientific lunatics in the research department's request for Ironmonger's head and dispatched Frank and his team to Hell's Kitchen for the mission. But who could have imagined that this mission would result in such heavy casualties? The deaths of over 50 or 60 agents in total caused SHIELD's New York branch to be severely understaffed and unable to function. The aftermath of those 50 or 60 deaths was even more daunting. The death compensation alone would be an astronomical sum. And all of this would fall on the shoulders of the director of SHIELD, the one who had signed the mission order. At the thought of this, Nick Fury's face darkened to the point of utter dismay, and he let out another classic fuck. Taking a deep breath and suppressing his emotions, Nick Fury said coldly, "Why didn't you tell me right away when this happened?" The agent glanced at his director with a hint of fear before saying, "Director, you instructed me to get some rest after the meeting." During his time in Europe, Nick Fury had argued forcefully at multinational conferences, spending days alone, to ensure SHIELD could carry out its mission more smoothly. He secured significant legal benefits for SHIELD in order to better execute its mission. Privately, he expended considerable energy, cultivating connections through various means to ensure the powers he had secured would not become empty talk. After all this effort, Nick Fury, upon boarding his private plane to the Federation, simply desired a good night's sleep. He had instructed his accompanying agents not to disturb him unless it was an emergency. Recalling what he'd said before, Nick Fury interrupted, "What about Frank Grillo and the others' mission this time? So many people died, and don't tell me that Joker's okay, that Joker's missing." What? He'd killed so many of his men, gotten him into such a huge mess. And now, to tell him the culprit was missing, it was hard to believe Nick Fury could accept that. Facing Nick Fury's voice, which suddenly rose an octave, the level 3 agent reporting across from him felt a pang of anguish. "What sin have I committed? I finally got a transfer from combat to civilian duty through connections, and on my first day, I'm given this report." If Pepper were here, she'd recognize that this level 3 agent in a suit and tie was the same one who'd driven her through the streets of New York and nearly lost her life to Ironmonger. After taking a deep breath, the SHIELD agent trembled and said, "The commander has activated SHIELD satellites to urgently locate the Joker. If he shows up, we'll quickly track him down." If the Joker was determined to hide, out of sight of satellite cameras, how long would it take to locate him using satellite positioning alone? Furthermore, if he disguised himself and drastically changed his appearance, it would be uncertain whether the satellite's automatic identification system would even be able to locate him. Thinking of this, Nick Fury immediately dispatch a group of elite agents from other states to New York. Then have the technical department quickly find clues to the Joker. Also, send all the agents currently in the New York branch. I don't believe that with so many people, we can't find any clues. At this point, as if remembering the Joker's immense power, Nick Fury paused and said, "Order Agent Clint Barton to New York immediately." Yes, the agent beside Nick Fury immediately obeyed the order and eagerly turned and left. He didn't want to stay here any longer and be affected by Nick Fury's anger. He was just an agent who had already laid down and wanted to wait for death. There was no need for him to bear the director's anger. Chapter 149 One is not safe, why don't you get a few more? While Hydra and SHIELD were furious over the heavy casualties caused by Arling and Bucky, donning thick coats, leisurely enjoyed a ride to New York in the back of a refrigerated truck filled with frozen fish. Ailin wasn't worried about the truck's driver taking any threatening action. He had hypnotized the driver before boarding. The driver was now completely unaware of the two uninvited passengers, let alone any potential harm. Ailin and Bucky's physiques were far superior to those of ordinary people. While the icy chill of the refrigerated truck chilled them, it was only a slight chill. A ride back to New York wouldn't significantly affect them. On the contrary, the refrigerated truck's nature would help conceal their whereabouts. With a moment of leisure, Ailin sat on a fish rack filled with ice chips and, as if by magic, pulled a potion from his pocket. Then he lazily said to Buggy, "Now that you've completely digested the assassin potion, you can now begin your advancement by consuming the next potion in the sequence. This is the instigator potion, the 8th potion in the assassin potion's corresponding pathway. Consuming this potion will not only further strengthen your assassin abilities, but also grant you various extraordinary abilities, including misleading, instigating, and bewitching. These abilities will allow you to easily induce the evil desires within everyone, intensify conflicts, and provoke confrontation, greatly enriching your means of combating your enemies. However, each potion is extremely precious. The higher the sequence, the harder it is to obtain. Even I paid a considerable price to obtain this instigator potion. I can give you this instigator potion, but after taking it, you must serve me for 10 years, working to repay your debt." Upon hearing this, Buggy looked up at the clown, a look of confusion in his eyes. "Am I not working for you now? I understand," said Clown Ailin, shaking his head after reading the meaning in Bucky's eyes. "It's different. What I want is for you to truly serve me, not just pretend. In fact, you should be completely unaffected by the mental imprint I planted. Perhaps it was because he inherited much of the dark side of his original soul, or perhaps it was the influence of the clown mask, but Ailin's emotional control was far more sensitive than his true self. After Bucky took the assassin potion and regained consciousness, he keenly sensed a subtle shift in Bucky's attitude towards him. Initially, Ailin thought the mental imprint he had planted deep within Bucky's psyche had been weakened by his taking the assassin potion and becoming a transcendent. But during the subsequent tests, whether it was Bucky's prolonged silence after his deliberate words in the bunker, or his unfazed reaction when he hypnotized the refrigerated truck driver in front of Bucky, he noticed something. He was telling himself that the Bucky in front of him had already shed the mental imprint he had planted deep within his soul. It was precisely for this reason that the clown, Ailin, directly took out the instigator potion and spoke directly to Bucky. Bucky frowned, pondering for a long moment before asking uncertainly, "Is the mental imprint you're referring to the gentle ball of light in my mind? After taking the assassin potion, I heard whispers that nearly drove me mad. If it weren't for the gentle aura of that ball of light constantly stabilizing my mental will and helping me through that period, I'd probably have gone mad. If you hadn't told me, I'd have thought it was a protective measure to help me survive the backlash of the potion. Well, if that's the mental imprint you're talking about, then before I drink this instigator potion, please place a few more in my mind. Otherwise, if this potion is more potent, I'm afraid I won't be able to withstand those strange whispers." At this point, Bucky's face was serious and solemn. He didn't fear physical pain. Even if his body were cut open by a saw, Bucky was confident he could remain calm. But the mental torture of feeling like his soul was being torn apart, his mind flooded with countless information, was a terrible pain. Bucky honestly felt he couldn't make it. If the mental imprints the clown Ailin was talking about were the same ones he'd felt before, then a few more. Across from Bucky, Ailin, already bracing himself for Bucky's sudden wrath, was filled with questions upon hearing this. Could mental imprints have such hidden benefits? No. Why would Bucky make such a bizarre request? After decades of Hydra control, shouldn't he loathe such mind control tactics? If you don't understand, ask. Ailin addressed Bucky directly. Why would you make such a request? Aren't you afraid I'll use you like a Hydra puppet, manipulating your mind at will? Bucky looked at Ailin and asked, "Will you?" Ailin instinctively replied, "Of course not." Just as Ailin disliked having his own fate controlled, he also disliked controlling the fates of those around him. Except, of course, for his enemies. After hearing what Clown Ailin said, Bucky smiled and said, "That's all." He didn't know if it was intuition or something else, but every time he saw Clown Ailin, he could sense a sense of chaos, madness, and a dedication to freedom. This feeling became even more pronounced after he took the potion and ascended to assassin. Buggy's intuition told him that someone with such a dedication to freedom wouldn't be manipulated like Hydra. Feeling the genuine smile on Bucky's face, Clown Ailin's smile faded slightly. Then he said seriously, "I am not Hydra, I will not control you like a puppet, but when necessary, I will not hesitate to let you go to the most dangerous battlefield to cover the rear." Buggy shrugged and said, "Sacrificing on the battlefield is the fate and glory of a warrior." After looking at Buggy's clear eyes for 3 seconds, the clown Ailin suddenly threw the instigator potion in his hand to Buggy, then crossed his legs and leaned against a fish frame behind him, and said lazily, "In that case, what are you waiting for? Drink it quickly and get promoted." After reaching out to take the instigator potion thrown by the clown Ailin, Buggy said to Clown Ailin seriously, "Before I drink it, give me a few of those mental imprints you mentioned." Seeing the seriousness in Buggy's eyes, Ailin opened her mouth in surprise and asked, "Huh? Are you serious?" Buggy smiled bitterly and said, "Of course, you didn't take what I just said as a joke, did you? Without that large ball of light, I really don't have the confidence to withstand the mumbling that occurs when taking the potion." Clown Ailin. Half an hour later. At Buggy's insistence, Ailin expended a great deal of mental energy and finally planted another enhanced mental imprint deep in Buggy's mind. Perhaps because Buggy had transformed from an ordinary person into a beyonder of the witch path, the energy consumption of planting the mental imprint in Buggy's mind this time was several times greater than before. Even Ailin, with his spiritual attainments, found it difficult to withstand such a powerful mental imprint. Ailin, facing the clown, feeling the familiar aura of light in his mind once again, Buggy, who had just taken the instigator potion, felt a slight sense of security. However, feeling the lone mental imprint in his mind, Buggy frowned slightly. The whisper contained in the assassin potion had already destroyed a mental imprint. So, with the instigator potion, which was even more powerful than the assassin potion, wouldn't a single mental imprint be enough? Thinking of this, Buggy opened his eyes and said to the clown, "Isn't one mental imprint enough? How about getting a few more?" Hearing this, the clown, Ailin, pulled a frozen fish from the ice-strewn fish basket beneath him and angrily threw it at Buggy. Get lost. A few minutes later, after briefly composing himself, Buggy picked up the test tube in front of him, tilted his head back, and drank the instigator potion. Gulp. Gulp. As the cold potion flowed down his throat, countless bubbles burst. Following the clown Ailin's instructions, Buggy carefully experienced the changes brought about by this stimulation. At that moment, dozens of bubbles of various sizes seemed to appear in his mind, each one containing unknown information. Bang, bang, bang. As each bubble burst, Buggy's mind suddenly flooded with information. The veins on Buggy's forehead bulged, and he felt as if his head was about to be torn apart and exploded by the huge flow of information. At this moment, the ethereal whispers sounded again, echoing continuously in Buggy's mind. Chick, quark, chick, quark, chick, quark. It was unknown how long it lasted. When Buggy opened his eyes again, he had become an instigator. However, compared to the last time, Buggy's face was unusually pale after his promotion. Seeing Buggy's pale face, Ailin, the clown sitting across from him, constantly monitoring his condition, frowned slightly and said, "You don't look well, huh?" After exhaling deeply, Buggy said with a wry smile, "This time, the whispers in my mind suddenly became more than 10 times louder. Even with the help of that mental mark you placed, I almost failed to advance due to the interference of those whispers." Ailin's brow furrowed even more. Even after perfectly digesting the assassin potion, Buggy's advancement was still so dangerous. After a moment's reflection, Ailin spoke, "The consequences of Hydra's prolonged suppression, hypnosis, and mental torture on you are more severe than I imagined. Your mind is too weak now, and those indescribable whispers have a deeper impact on you than on ordinary people. Until your mind is improved or repaired, even if you have completely digested the instigator potion, I do not recommend you advance again." Buggy nodded silently, recalling how the whispers nearly drove him mad, leading to his failed advancement and his transformation into a monster. "I understand." Seeing Buggy's solemn expression, Ailin the clown once again wore his signature smile. "But don't worry too much. I'll teach you a meditation method that will enhance your mental power. Once you master it, I believe you'll be able to control your mind in no time. Besides, there are more ways to improve your mental power than just this one." "Alright, we'll have plenty of time to repair, remedy, and improve your mental power later. For now, You should quickly adapt to the improvements and new abilities gained by your promotion to instigator. After all, we have a tough battle ahead of us. Although they had just destroyed Hydra's New York branch, which was considered revenge, Clown Ailin had no intention of giving up. Hydra wanted his life, and while his counterattack had killed many Hydra members so far, most of them were small-time minions, with the highest ranking being only Crossbones and Sitwell, two mid-level and senior leaders. While their deaths would be heartbreaking for Hydra, given Hydra's size, it was far from enough to cause them any serious damage. Not to mention making them remember it in their hearts. Maybe, they are still planning how to retaliate. Therefore, for Ailin, if he wants to avoid being harassed by those annoying flies of Hydra in the future, the best way is to hurt them severely when they provoke him for the first time. Let them remember the price of provoking themselves. Only in this way, they will not provoke him easily again. As for how to hurt Hydra completely, in the eyes of the clown Ailin, at least one of the heads of the opponent must be seen. Baron Stark, Madam Viper and other high-level Hydra people are not easy to find, but is Alexander Pierce, the Minister of the World Security Council active in New York, not hard to find? Chapter 150 Hulk arrives. If he failed to kill the snake, he would be bitten. Killing Alexander Pierce, the head of the snake, would undoubtedly be a profound pain for Hydra, the group entrenched within SYNOPSIS. With this lesson in mind, Hydra would have to think twice before attempting to cause trouble. For Clown Ailin, assassinating Alexander Pierce was undoubtedly a highly cost-effective option. Furthermore, not many people in the world knew that Alexander Pierce was secretly the leader of Hydra. It seemed he could leverage this identity to further exploit it. After all, the news that the Minister of the World Security Council was secretly a Hydra plotting to overthrow the world would be devastating for the Federation and the world at large. Clown Ailin could almost imagine the enormity and chaos that would descend upon SHIELD and the World Security Council if this news became public. The Federation and the nations of the world would undoubtedly sow suspicion against SHIELD and the World Security Council. To regain the trust of the Federation and other nations, and to secure the substantial annual funding, SHIELD and the World Security Council, organizations directly linked to Alexander Pierce, will undoubtedly launch a frantic, intensive self-examination to prove their innocence and uncover the spies planted by Alexander Pierce. Under these circumstances, the hidden Hydra forces will likely be completely consumed simply by this intense self-examination. Why would they risk such a huge risk? At this critical juncture, why reveal their identities and then seek revenge? This way, Joker Ailin would be left alone. Furthermore, Alexander Pierce's position as Minister of the World Security Council greatly facilitates Ailin's search for him. The other Hydra leaders are all extremely secretive, operating in extremely tight quarters. Only Alexander Pierce, a high-ranking official who frequently attends international conferences, would occasionally expose his whereabouts to the public. To deal with Alexander Pierce, Clown Ailin only needed to use the few meetings he was required to attend, combined with his divination skills, to nearly pinpoint his target. As Clown Ailin pondered how to assassinate Alexander Pierce, Bucky, sitting across from him, silently observed himself, experiencing the changes that had taken place after becoming the instigator. After becoming the instigator, Bucky felt an itch all over his body, especially his left arm, which had been broken for who knows how many years. Rolling up his sleeve with his right hand, Bucky was stunned to see a new arm had grown where his left arm had once been empty. The skin on this new arm was as smooth and delicate as a baby's, and one could even faintly see the blood vessels pulsing within it. Hiss! Seeing the newly grown half of his arm, Bucky's face was filled with both joy and astonishment. Just then, the refrigerated truck carrying Clown Ailin and Bucky passed through Harlem. As night slowly fell, a gigantic, feces-colored monster suddenly appeared on the streets of Harlem, wreaking havoc on everything in sight. Emo Bronski was an elite veteran of the Special Forces, an ace among aces. Nearing 40, he possessed a wealth of experience and a brilliant resume. If it weren't for his thirst for combat, his intense enjoyment of the thrill of fighting on the front lines, and his insistence on staying on the front lines, he wouldn't have been the one to do it. His collection of honor badges alone, enough to cover a wall, would have earned him a promotion directly to colonel, making him a high-ranking member of the Federal Army. Not long ago, Emo Bronski accepted General Ross's invitation to travel to Brazil on a special, secret mission to capture a defecting scientist. Initially, Emo Bronski thought this mission would be an easy, vacation-like undertaking. After all, How could capturing a helpless scientist be any more difficult? But the reality proved otherwise. Everything he believed was completely wrong. The scientist, supposedly a powerless creature, transformed before his eyes into a massive, muscle-bound monster over 2 meters tall. Bullets powerful enough to penetrate a human body proved ineffective against this monster. Even the rocket launcher he had so longed for proved powerless to stop its rampage. Facing this monster, Emil Bronsky felt fear for the first time. This inhuman monster was simply no match for humankind. Yet, amidst this fear, he was also deeply fascinated by the Hulk's unparalleled strength and invulnerable physique. This also fueled a fierce jealousy of Banner. How could a powerless coward possess such immense power, while he, despite his utmost efforts, could only watch his own strength fade with age? Driven by this jealousy and resentment, Emil Bronsky accepted General Ross's offer without hesitation and received the Super Soldier Serum, a drug developed by Dr. Abraham Erskine during World War II. Of course, the injections Bronsky received weren't genuine Captain America serum, but a knockoff. Even so, Bronsky's strength, speed, and agility reached astonishing levels, far surpassing even his peak. Of course, facing a monster like the Hulk, Bronsky was undoubtedly defeated again. His strength, nearing the limits of the human body, was no match for the Hulk. Without the super serum, he would have been slain instantly by the Hulk's blow. This filled Bronsky with impotence and rage, and his thirst for power only intensified. Desperate for even greater strength, he braved the danger and received a second, larger dose of Super Soldier Serum. This second injection of Super Soldier Serum fully enhanced Bronsky's body, further increasing his strength and healing abilities, but it also caused a slight deformation of his spine. Despite his increased strength, Bronsky knew that his power and strength were still far from the Hulk's. Fortunately, fate offered him a chance. While attempting to capture Banner again, Bronsky accidentally captured Samuel Stern, a scientist treating Banner, and obtained a vial of the Hulk's blood, laced with gamma radiation. Driven by a desperate need for power, Bronsky forced Stern to inject him with the Hulk's blood. Ultimately, Bronsky succeeded and failed. The Hulk's blood reacted with the Super Soldier Serum in his system, granting Bronsky the extraordinary powers he had always dreamed of. However, it also transformed him into a monster even more hideous than the Hulk's. However, Bronsky cared nothing for it. His mind was preoccupied with finding the Hulk, defeating him, and ultimately proclaiming to the world who is the world's most powerful warrior. In his quest to find the Hulk, Bronsky, now a detestable being, began rampaging through Harlem, demonstrating his newfound godlike strength and ripping apart anyone who challenged it. "Come out, Hulk, you coward! Come out!" Bronsky roared, lifting a car and hurling it aside. Destroying a store, attempting to provoke the hidden Bruce Banner. The abomination appeared on the streets, rampaging and unleashing his power recklessly, paralyzing several streets in Harlem. In just over 10 minutes, reporters from major New York television stations converged on Harlem. They then, regardless of the danger, broadcast footage of the abomination. In this moment, the journalists displayed astonishing resilience and fearlessness, as if their own lives were nothing compared to the blazing news. However, it was precisely this fearlessness that made even more people aware of the terrifying nature of the abomination. God, what kind of monster is this? Is it a demon from hell? Damn it! My daughter works in Harlem. God help my baby, don't let her run into that monster. Where is Iron Man? Iron Man is there, why hasn't he come out to stop this monster? If this continues, Harlem will be destroyed by this monster, unchecked. The abomination, unleashing its own power recklessly, caused staggering destruction. Even Ironmonger, who had once appeared on the streets of New York, couldn't have caused even a tenth of the damage. After all, although Obadiah had become a mechanical life form, he still had his sanity. His targets from the beginning were Pepper, the Joker who had obstructed his actions, and Iron Man. The ordinary people who died at his hands were merely unfortunate innocents caught in the crossfire. But Abomination was different. Bronsky, his sanity largely obliterated by his immense power and rage, wanted nothing more than to destroy everything he encountered. Beep, beep. At the same time, a shrill alarm rang out in Tony Stark's mansion. Tony, contemplating how to upgrade his Mark IV suit to even greater performance, was interrupted by the siren. He frowned slightly. "What's wrong, Jarvis?" "Sir, I've checked the surveillance footage and found a massive crisis unfolding in Harlem." Jarvis then projected the footage he'd captured, along with the federal television broadcasts of the abomination, in front of Tony. Tony, sitting in front of the sofa, looked at the hideous and ugly face of abomination projected by Jarvis, frowned slightly and said, "Oh, shit, this guy is so ugly that he almost made me vomit the steak I ate last night. Sorry, sir." After quickly mosaicing the face of abomination, Jarvis said again, "According to the footage captured by the surveillance, this monster, temporarily named Abomination, has caused 67 deaths and more than 100 injuries since it appeared in Harlem. This is the statistics I made based on the footage captured by the surveillance, and the number is still increasing. The number of casualties that appeared in the surveillance is so large. How many deaths will there be that are not captured by the surveillance?" Thinking of this, Tony's face suddenly darkened. What? Are the New York police and military all idiots? With such heavy casualties, they didn't react at all, Jarvis said. In fact, if it weren't for the New York police and military's intervention, the casualties in Harlem would have at least doubled. Furthermore, the NYPD and military sent to support the attack also suffered heavy casualties under that monster's rampage. Jarvis replayed several previously captured images for Tony to see. In the magnified images, one could clearly see uniformed police officers being smashed into pulp by the abomination. Even the armored vehicles sent by the military were flattened and torn apart by the monster. The bullets they fired at the abomination, however, only infuriated it, causing no effective damage at all. Based on the comparison, the abomination that appeared in Harlem bears a strong resemblance to the monster that appeared at Culver University not long ago. They share the same immense strength and invulnerability. Huh? Wasn't the Culver University monster a military creation? Tony's eyes narrowed slightly at this. Then, thinking of the military soldiers who had quickly appeared in Harlem, he seemed to understand something. He gritted his teeth and said, "Another military ethics, Jarvis, call Rhodes for me and have him explain this monster to me." "Yes, sir." With that, Tony quickly rushed to the basement and loaded the Mark IV with powerful weapons. Even so, Tony still felt it wasn't safe enough. There was no other way. After witnessing the abomination's terrifying physique, Tony had no confidence in ordinary weapons. After restocking the Mark armor with ammunition, Tony stood at the console and raised his hands. The latest Mark armor automatically opened and enveloped him. Move. The next second, the golden red steel armor soared into the sky, streaking through the dark night sky like a meteor. Elsewhere, seeing the number of people killed by the abomination increasing, Banner finally couldn't bear the torment in his heart. He jumped from the helicopter, awakening the Hulk with death and pain. The next second, the Hulk arrived. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.